Mang thought he had escaped death. But in Satan's database, he saw another door. The second universe, the Hell Train, and the fact that faith could be exchanged for resources. From that moment, he understood. His next enemies might not even belong to the living. Please continue following Mang as we step into the next episode. After that, he crawled back through the refrigerator, returning to the Naya star system. He didn't go back to destroy the one-time wormhole he had created. Letting it dissipate on its own was fine. His wormhole had extremely low spatial fluctuations, making it incredibly hard to detect. But if he forcefully destroyed it, the fluctuations would spike, easily exposing him. The lesson from the God Clan's apostle was still fresh in his mind. In someone else's territory, it was best not to cause too many spatial or energy fluctuations. Working in silence was the safest bet. The less noise, the better. Mang returned to the Naya star system and looked at the Doppler radar screen. He waited patiently for a while. Still, no one approached the refrigerator's location. Clearly, that level 4 civilization hadn't discovered the wormhole yet. Mang let out a soft breath. Then the next step would be much simpler. He just needed to thoroughly investigate their overall strength. If he could fight them, he would. If not, he'd change targets. Coming back another day wouldn't be too late. Even though he had only skimmed through the GE star system for a split second, the enemy tracking radar had still managed to gather information on all the accessories of the trains passing within a 0.15 light-year radius. He noticed that almost every train shared one specific item, a prismatic-grade accessory, the Gates of Hell. Its effect was simple. By consuming a small amount of faith power, it could pull dead crew members back from hell. But the train captain couldn't be resurrected. Mang frowned. That strong? In this universe, had resurrection become something so common? If the Zerg civilization could resurrect, he'd understand. After all, they were God tier. The Immortal God Clan wasn't surprising either. They were basically the darlings of the universe. But why did a level 4 civilization have this trick? And why didn't he? How long would it take for him to get his hands on a resurrection method? Mang paused for a beat. Only one thought crossed his mind. Annoying. But he still had to stay calm. Of course, this type of resurrection wasn't like the Zerg civilizations. The Zerg's resurrection was considered pure combat power. Infinite resurrections meant an endless battle. But for the GE civilization, their main combat power didn't lie with the train crew. Bluntly speaking, it was like giving a street thug an extra life. It sounded insane, but in reality, it didn't do much. It was mostly for support and didn't actually elevate their true combat strength. Furthermore, according to universal consensus, the GE civilization was considered a fake level 4. Because a true level 4 civilization had to be located near a cosmic void. The GE civilization wasn't, so they couldn't utilize the strongest methods of a level 4. On the other hand, the level 4 civilization occupying a star system with a diameter of 170,000 light-years had a cosmic void right behind them. That civilization was called the Haomiao civilization. That made sense. Haomiao's radar probably hadn't reached level 500 yet, or maybe there were other factors at play. Otherwise, they wouldn't have ignored a high-resource zone right next door for so long. If GE had a level 500 radar, their first priority should have been finding a cosmic void and relocating. They should have found their way to Naya a long time ago. Wait, that's not right. Mang stared at the control screen, freezing for a moment. He zoomed in on the GE star system and noticed something clearly. The resource planets there had been almost completely mined out. Their military was constantly gathering, looking exactly like a general mobilization before a war. His mouth twitched slightly. He instantly understood. The GE civilization really did have a level 500 radar. Gathering an army when there were no enemies on the radar meant only one thing. They were going to look for a cosmic void. In other words, they were about to swarm this area, because Naya looked like an easier target. The only reason they hadn't come yet was that they wanted to squeeze every last drop of resources from their own home before moving. Mang found it a bit funny. So the wormhole he opened earlier was kind of a waste. He didn't need to actively look for them, because they were coming right to him. The cosmic void was terrifyingly vast. He and Haomiao were both relying on the same cosmic void, just facing different directions, each on a different edge. Mang pondered. Good thing he had upgraded his radar to level 500. Otherwise, The enemy would have marched right up to his doorstep, and he'd still be completely blind. The cosmic void was absurdly long, but a civilization couldn't survive in the empty space outside a star system. They could only take root within one. Therefore, for the GE civilization, there were only two choices for a target: the Haomiao civilization or the human civilization. Or maybe, there was only one real choice. Chen Meng narrowed his eyes. He didn't say it out loud, but his mind was already made up. He reviewed the situation in the Naya star system and finalized his plan. The enemy was gathering their forces, but they definitely still needed time. It could be a few days, or it could be a few months. But no matter how long it took, striking first was always the right move. Strike first to gain the upper hand. Chen Meng reminded himself. Don't be greedy. Don't be rash. Fight with absolute certainty. A day later, Chen Meng led Biao Zi and a few others to appear on a planet within the GE civilization. The people here all had 3 heads and 6 arms. Without disguises, the group would stand out immediately. Fortunately, the human civilization had inherited the cultivation civilization's legacy. Hiding their physical forms wasn't a difficult task. Chen Meng glanced through the crowd, his heartbeat slowing down. He only needed one thing: don't get exposed. As long as the opening act went smoothly, this game would be much easier to play. For the cultivation civilization, changing their outward appearance was no big deal. After obtaining a spirit treasure from the Tianji Pavilion Master, the group easily transformed their appearances to have 3 heads and 6 arms, looking exactly like the people of the GE civilization. As long as they weren't stopped for a thorough inspection, they looked no different from the locals. Chen Meng reminded himself. Only by diving deep into their inner workings could he see the backbone of a civilization. If he wanted to fight, he had to know where their weaknesses and fatal flaws lay. It really was a bit eerie. Chen Meng sat in a coffee shop. The cup in front of him remained full. He hadn't taken a single sip. Xiao AI had tapped into this civilization's network and discovered that almost every exploration train was equipped with a specific type of accessory. 7-colored firepower, the Satan cannons. These were firepower accessories that consumed copper ore. Their power was on par with common 7-colored cannons, the only difference being they weren't photon cannons, so the projectile speed didn't reach the speed of light. However, unless the target was absurdly fast, they were nearly impossible to dodge. The most unsettling part was the effect. Every bullet fired literally came from the future. Even if you didn't have a single unit of copper ore right now, you could fire continuously for a year without needing supplies. All consumption would be charged to the future. After a year, you just had to pay back the exact amount of copper ore you borrowed. If you couldn't pay, Sa Dan would take your life. Hearing this made a chill run down Chen Meng's spine. He thought to himself, this isn't just pure technology anymore. It's exactly like a contract. That wasn't all. There were many other special accessories, like altars. By sacrificing certain items to Sa Dan, one would receive rewards. The highest rewards were reserved for pure-blooded humans, those without mutations, without extra limbs, without prioritized talents, and not deformed into something bizarre. As long as they were human, there would be a reward after the sacrifice. The purer the bloodline, the greater the reward. Almost every clue led back to one name: Sa Dan, the god of the extreme evil civilization. This was a civilization that blended divinity with the trained civilization system. Chen Meng frowned slightly. He remained silent for a moment, feeling the situation beginning to deviate from his expectations. He had once spoken with the leaders of the Xingho civilization. In this universe, there were no true gods. Even the god race weren't actual deities. A real god would have to be omnipotent like the laws of the universe, immortal, eternal, and transcending all limits. Most trained civilizations were like the Xingho civilization. They chose a cosmic behemoth or a totem pole. Then they used massive amounts of faith power to wash over it, causing it to mutate, and then received feedback to gain power. To put it bluntly, the essence of a divine civilization was to create a god first, then believe in it later. The god was just a medium, not a truly existing entity. But the extreme evil civilization gave him a different feeling. Sa Dan here felt like a real existence, as if a person named Sa Dan was actually operating. Chen Meng thought to himself, if that's true, then we're in big trouble. Just then, Pavilion Master Tianji returned from scouting for information. As a cultivator, this was his first time being useful in a civilization-level operation. He wanted to prove himself to earn greater benefits for his clan within the human civilization. His shape-shifting ability made him like a fish in water. It was almost impossible for him to be exposed. He walked into the shop, sat down, drained his coffee in one gulp, and wiped the stain from the corner of his mouth. Only then did he lower his head and speak softly and respectfully. "Boss Mang, I've scouted some news." He lowered his voice another notch. Every train, when exploring the universe, looks for small, weak civilizations. They perform miracles to make the people there believe in Sa-Dan. The faith power is received by Sa-Dan, who then grants them a certain amount of faith points in return. This faith power helps them upgrade their faith accessories or is used for consumption. Pavilion Master Tianji paused, as if weighing his words. "I'm almost certain that Sa-Dan might actually exist, and he's very active." He continued, his eyes brightening slightly. "I saw with my own eyes that the happiness index of the people on the street is very high." Then someone was hit by a car and seriously injured. A priest happened to be passing by. He knelt and prayed for a moment, and a white light shone down from the sky, completely healing the person. It was miraculous. Chen Mang didn't reply immediately. He just felt like there was a stone in his stomach. He thought to himself, if this is just fake God technology, it can still be measured. But if it's a real entity, all calculations must be redone. Right then, the table next to them ordered more coffee. A three-headed, six-armed waiter brought over 3 empty cups first. Then he patted his left head. The head bowed, and from its mouth flowed a bit of coffee. Then he patted the right head, and out flowed some milk. "Please enjoy." The people at the next table started drinking, praising it nonstop. Chen Mang remained calm, only pushing the cup in front of him a bit further away. He whispered a single sentence in his mind, "Don't touch it." It wasn't a fear of being dirty, but rather the faith attached to the thing. Pavilion Master Tianji's face turned pale, and he froze in place. His eyes darted around, clearly trying to find a restroom. Xiao Ai, who was sitting nearby in disguise, spoke softly as if to reassure him. "It's actually fine. The body structure of the extreme evil people is different from ours. They are excellent natural fermentation environments. So many bars and coffee shops use their stomachs for fermentation. And because of this method, labor costs increase significantly. Usually, only high-end shops use it. Overall, due to the different organs, there are no bacteria or saliva like you're imagining. If you can get past the presentation, the taste is actually better than the coffee back home." Chen Mang just gave a faint grunt in response. In his mind, one thought persisted. The more he looked, the more abnormal this civilization seemed. Hearing that, Pavilion Master Tianji's expression softened slightly. He licked his lips and said hesitantly, "The taste actually isn't bad." Chen Mang didn't answer, only taking the tablet Xiao Ai handed him. His train couldn't be equipped with faith accessories. Unless he believed in Sa-Dan first and was accepted by him, he couldn't use those items. Chen Mang flipped through the information and reached a conclusion in his mind. The faith of the extreme evil civilization isn't just for show. It's a god with signs of real existence. A civilization with a real god usually has extremely high unity, and that is the most dangerous thing. But there was one strange point. This god didn't seem to be within the extreme evil civilization, or more accurately, not in this dimension. He could only send down miracles and then harvest faith power. He couldn't descend himself. He couldn't directly appear in the physical world. Chen Mang narrowed his eyes slightly. He thought to himself, then there's still a loophole. "A god, huh?" Chen Mang calmly turned the page, his voice very low. "Just a special existence with great power. If he were truly a god, why hasn't he discovered us yet?" He questioned himself internally. If he were truly omnipotent, beyond even the laws of the universe, he should have sensed me lurking and observing long ago. This feeling made him feel as though he had just touched the edge of another world, another layer of space that he had never set foot in before. "Let's go." Chen Mang stood up, grabbed his cane from the chair, turned, and walked out of the shop. It was time to meet Sa-Dan. He understood very well that the greatest trump card of the extreme evil civilization was Sa-Dan. To destroy this civilization, that thing had to be dealt with first. In the extreme evil civilization, Many claim to have seen Sa Dan with their own eyes. But no depiction of his appearance was ever passed down. Everyone's story was the same. There was a planet called Planet Sa Dan. All trained masters who wanted to install faith accessories had to go there. They had to pass through a specialized bronze portal, enter a mysterious world, and personally have an audience with Sa Dan. Only with his approval could they install the faith accessories. Chen Mang wanted to see it for himself. He needed to know what kind of method Sa Dan was actually using. Of course, before that, he had to prepare as thoroughly as possible. In space, Chen Mang sat in the passenger seat of an interstellar ship. He brought Biao Zi and a few others, posing as ordinary travelers, heading straight for planet Sa Dan. He didn't fly his own train because it was too conspicuous. Right now, it was shrunk down into a brooch pinned to his chest. He would only summon it when it was time to fight. During his year of development in the Nia star system, he had accomplished a lot. Most importantly, he had created a spatial wormhole. Its endpoint connected directly to the attack path of a level 4987 photon beam in the cosmic void. He had thrown quite a few refrigerators along that path. If needed, he could locate that photon cannon within 24 hours. Then he could absorb its energy to temporarily boost his armor to a certain level. Chen Mang told himself, this is a backup plan. It's not pretty, but it's enough. Additionally, throughout that year, he had continuously prepared every usable resource, utilizing everything at his disposal. Foundation is something that must be accumulated over time. It cannot be rushed. This interstellar ship was on a direct flight to planet Sa Dan. The cabin was packed with three-headed, six-armed passengers. Every one of them was devout, with a level of piety akin to a pilgrimage. The atmosphere weighed on one's chest, making any normal person feel the pressure. It was a forced conformity. Chen Mang looked around silently, then tilted his head to look at the view outside the window. He thought to himself, in terms of civilizational foundation, human civilization is still a step behind. The ship was very fast, though he didn't know what method it used. It looked like the movement of a cosmic behemoth 2 light years in diameter. It crawled through space, using multi-point teleportation to boost its speed. He didn't have those mechanisms. He only had raw stats, but he also knew that despite its speed, this ship was far below the speed limit of his Huangshinghao. In the face of absolute stats, all mechanisms are just compensations. Just then, in the row of seats ahead, a middle-aged man suddenly gasped, convulsed, and collapsed onto the floor. All three of his heads were gasping for air, struggling to breathe. His face turned pale, and his hands clutched his chest as he writhed on the ground. He was clearly dying. The crowd immediately panicked, but soon after, urgent shouts came from the back of the car. "Move aside! Move aside! A priest is here! Make way for the priest!" Quickly, an old man wearing a priest's robe, surrounded by the crowd, slowly approached. He knelt before the convulsing man, placed a hand on his forehead, closed his eyes with a look of deep devotion, and muttered, "In the name of Sa Dan, I bless the sick. May the wisdom of Biliad allow you to see through false mercy. May the desire of Adamode ignite a burning will to live within you. May the pride of Lucifer lead you beyond the shackles of worldly suffering. If you are destined to fall, may you become an enemy in the darkness. If you are healed, may you become a king in the light. True salvation lies not in the lies of heaven, but in the awakening of the abyss." The priest knelt on the floor, praying with his eyes tightly shut. 2 hands were placed on the patient's forehead, while the other 4 were clasped in front of his chest. A white light gradually emanated from him, flickering like fireflies in the night, as his mouth continued to whisper incessantly. A moment later, the priest suddenly opened his eyes, which flashed with a mix of envy and compassion. He looked around the car and spoke clearly. "Sa Dan has responded. He says this man has been kind his whole life, and he cannot bear to see him continue to suffer. Therefore, he has specially summoned him to the holy temple to serve by Sa Dan's side from now on." Immediately after, the patient, who had almost stopped convulsing and seemed about to open his eyes, saw the priest raise his glowing hand. All 6 hands slammed down simultaneously on the man's head. With a dry crack, his head was crushed instantly, blood and flesh splattering everywhere. Dead, completely and utterly dead. At the same time, The entire train car erupted in cheers. Everyone's face was flushed red, as excited as if they had just witnessed a coronation. Chen Meng watched it all, his lip twitching slightly. If he wasn't mistaken, the man who fell had just had an epileptic seizure. When this condition flares up, falling and convulsing is normal. They usually wake up on their own after a while. Unless their nose or mouth is blocked, they rarely die. And yet, just as he was about to wake up, he was beaten to death and told he was being summoned by Sa Dan. Chen Meng thought to himself, what kind of salvation is this? This is just legalized murder. At this point, the conductor also rushed over, full of gratitude, and handed the priest a significant amount of wealth. Xiao Ai, sitting next to him, explained in a low voice. Conductor, in the extreme evil civilization, everyone believes that, as long as they die fighting for Sa Dan, they will go to the holy temple. It is a place without sickness or death, only fine wine and joy. Suicide or dying of old age won't get you there. Therefore, what they crave most is to die in battle or be summoned by Sa Dan. Xiao Ai continued steadily. Priests are the chosen spokespeople of Sa Dan, with the ability to communicate with him. To become a priest, one must pass an extremely difficult examination. In the extreme evil civilization, priests have very high status and immense power. No one dares to offend them. Even civilization leaders wouldn't dare be disrespectful in front of a priest, because doing so would trigger a revolt from the populace. Then she added another layer. Many trains also have the Hellbird, a 7-colored accessory that can resurrect all passengers who have died on the train. But resurrection has limits. Each person can be resurrected twice at most. After 2 times, it's true death. And they believe everyone who dies fighting for the train can also enter the holy temple. So, being a train guard is an extremely glorious profession, taking death as an honor and the holy temple as home. Chen Meng remained silent, his face calm. But in his mind, he had reached a different, colder conclusion. Initially, he thought Sa Dan was just a trick invented by the rulers to maintain control. But the more he looked, the less it seemed that way. Every sign pointed toward something that provided real feedback. The only question was, does that thing have flesh and blood? Can it be killed? Chen Meng reminded himself, whether to fight or not is a later concern. First, I must secure an escape route. Attacks can be few, but escape routes must be many. And even though this civilization is bizarre, he would still go through with it. The reason was very practical. The grass and wood civilization didn't strip star systems of resources like the extreme evil civilization did. The extreme evil civilization had already pre-packaged everything. There was no need for an extraction phase. He just had to steal it. Chen Meng thought to himself, excessive convenience is also a trap. But a trap must still be entered if the profit is large enough. Just then, perhaps because Chen Meng was so out of sync with the fanatical passengers, the priest, who was grinning and enjoying the reverence, suddenly glanced at him. He frowned, then slowly walked over and asked in a raspy voice, "Did you not see the miracle Sa Dan sent down?" A sick man received Sa Dan's grace and was specially summoned to the holy temple. Chen Meng nodded. He didn't intend to reveal his identity. He made his voice sound raspy and even tried to make his eyes look bloodshot. "I saw it, priest. It's just that I'm so moved I can't speak. And I'm a little jealous. Why wasn't I the one summoned to the holy temple? I am questioning myself for having such negative emotions." His mind was cold as ice. Just play the part. Don't let him see the disbelief. The priest looked satisfied. He nodded and patted Chen Meng's shoulder. "As long as you are devout enough. Sooner or later, you will have the chance to sacrifice yourself fighting for Sa Dan. The glory of Sa Dan will spread throughout the universe." The priest continued, his voice sounding like he was issuing a command. "Sa Dan has handed down an order. There is a star system 780,000 light-years from here. It is a heretical civilization, the ultimate evil. The extreme evil civilization, under Sa Dan's instructions, has begun mobilizing its army. We will attack that star system as soon as possible. We are currently recruiting on a large scale. Go. Sacrifice yourself fighting for Sa Dan, and he will wait for you at the holy temple to reward your courage, and to celebrate the day of your return." "Yes." Chen Meng nodded vigorously, his eyes tearing up. Then he did exactly what people did on the network. He slammed his fist against his chest. so intense. Sa-dan is eternal, darkness is immortal. The priest also looked solemn and slammed his fist against his chest. Sa-dan is eternal, darkness is immortal. In the extreme evil civilization, the name Sa-dan alone carried inherent respect. There was no need for titles like Lord or anything similar, as it would be considered excessive. Chun Mang had infiltrated to gather intel, so naturally, he didn't overlook these cultural details. He reminded himself not to get exposed over a small mistake. Afterward, Chun Mang watched the priest retreating back, his expression gradually returning to calm. A legal murder, in the truest sense. He was certain that the priest just now hadn't received any summoning order from Sa-dan. In his mind, he quickly reconstructed how the miracles operated. Sa-dan wanted to maintain his rule, so he screened a group of priests and sent them to the surface to perform miracles. For example, if they found someone seriously injured, they would heal them. But even with divine power, Sa-dan couldn't possibly monitor every prayer, every hour, every minute. So the priests would wait. They'd wait for a response to heal and show off a miracle. And if there was no response, they would directly kill the patient and declare it a special summons to the holy temple. Chun Mang thought to himself, brilliant. A closed logic loop, they win no matter what. And that also revealed one thing. Sa-dan is definitely not unreasonably strong. Chun Mang silently labeled him in his mind. If he were truly as powerful as a god and so active, the extreme evil civilization wouldn't have stayed at level 4 for so long. They would have gone to crush the nearby level 5 civilizations long ago, or directly crossed to the other side of the cosmic void to wage war with the other level 5 South American civilization. In short, he has some strength, but it's still within normal limits. He felt a bit more at ease. The interstellar ship continued its journey. Throughout the trip, the priest almost never stopped. He harassed all the women on the ship, from young to old, without exception, ordering them to be chosen as handmaidens in Sa-dan's name. The inspection method was so vulgar it was hard to describe, forcing them to perform humiliating acts. What was even more disturbing was that many had husbands or relatives with them, but those people seemed hypnotized. They didn't feel violated. On the contrary, they saw this as a grace bestowed by Sa-dan, each one kneeling nearby with faces full of gratitude. While the priest worked, they closed their eyes and prayed, only hoping their wives would be chosen to serve Sa-dan in the holy temple. Chun Mang watched the scene, his face remaining calm, as he felt the terrifying power of faith for the first time. It could bend a person's perception completely, making the absurd seem natural, even glorious. Just looking at it gives me the creeps, he thought. So if this faith were gathered into a single flow, what kind of energy would it burst with? He vaguely understood what Sa-dan wanted, this pure faith, perhaps to upgrade itself, to ascend to another level. Soon, the ship arrived. They had reached planet Sa-dan. The group set foot on the planet with the densest faith. The Bronze Gate, the entrance to Sa-dan's holy temple, was located right on this planet. As soon as they got off the ship, they saw countless people prostrating themselves, over and over, then crawling slowly in the same direction. That direction was the Bronze Gate. Let's go, Chun Mang said briefly. He led everyone into a vehicle and quickly reached the entrance of the Bronze Gate. A long line stood before the gate. It was about 30 meters high, embedded deep within the mountain, looking both majestic and chilling. Those in line were all ship captains wanting the right to use faith-based accessories. If Sa-dan approved, they wouldn't just get usage rights. They'd receive blueprints for faith accessories granted by Sa-dan, some of which were legendary 7-colored items. These were real benefits, not just empty slogans. And not everyone in the extreme evil civilization was that crazy. Take the old Mu, for example. Chun Mang was certain he was the least devout person on the ship, second only to their own group. Even so, his behavior was considered normal by their standards. At least he didn't involve children. Chun Mang didn't relax, reminding himself not to let his emotions give him away. He led Biao Zi and the others to the back of the line and started waiting. The goal was clear: get inside and take a look. To see what the Bronze Gate was actually hiding, and to see this so-called Sa-dan. Could he tank a shot from a Kai's level 500 light energy main cannon? Or maybe level 1000? If he can withstand both, Chun Mang thought coldly, then he really is a god in a practical sense. In that case, I'll run first and see him again later, if there is a later. 30 minutes later, Chen Meng frowned slightly and then gave a small nod. A sense of confidence took root in his heart, growing firmer. 30 minutes ago, he had spent a lot of money to bribe a ship manager further up the line. That person had stuffed a refrigerator into a spatial bag and brought it into the Bronze Gate. It was a small thing, but it took quite some effort. Mainly because the other party truly considered the Bronze Gate a holy land, believing that bringing in foreign objects was blasphemy and a great disrespect to Sadan. Of course, given enough profit, the man eventually took the risk. And now, Chen Meng could sense that the refrigerator had passed through the gate and was still functioning normally. That meant the Bronze Gate couldn't cut the connection between the two refrigerators. His escape route suddenly became much more viable. At least I won't be trapped to death in there, he reminded himself. The line was long, but the entry speed was fast. What he feared most didn't happen. There were no tedious inspections at the door. As long as you had a ship manager's certificate, you were in. It just proved your identity. Chen Meng looked at the gate before him, his heart steadying. The easier it is to enter, the more careful I must be, he thought. He had bought this item before setting out. It only cost a bit of money. Soon, it was finally Chen Meng's group's turn. He led Biao Zi and the others into the Bronze Gate. As soon as he saw the scene before him, his eyes shook slightly and his brow twitched. It was truly overwhelming. Before him was a deep, mysterious tunnel, looking exactly like a wormhole. 7 colored lights streaked backward along the walls at high speed. Within the light trails were countless rusty floating clouds, as if eroded by time. Right at the front of the tunnel stood 3 statues. They were cloaked, faces hidden, holding great swords, standing tall. Each statue had a different pose, but their aura was the same, cold and heavy. This was the Holy Temple, the residence of Sadan, the deity of the Level 4 extreme evil civilization. In the tunnel, many ship managers were leading their subordinates in another line. There were tables in front of the 3 statues. Behind the tables were men in white robes, their faces covered in white silk, processing the manager's paperwork. Once finished, they could leave the temple. These were the temple staff. Interesting, Chen Meng muttered softly as he watched. It seems Sadan isn't just a figurehead created for control, but something that actually exists, he thought. Before coming here, he had asked Chiya, but got no useful answer. Chiya said she'd never heard of a deity named Sadan in the universe and insisted that true gods don't exist. If one had to be called a god, only a god-tier collective might barely count. Just then, a cold, indifferent voice suddenly rang in Chen Meng's ear, as if right against his neck. My domain, is it beautiful? In the next moment, before he could even react, a powerful gust of wind hit him from behind. A man appeared out of nowhere, his fingers turning into claws that tore through the air, stabbing straight into Chen Meng's back. A sharp pain shot through his body. Chen Meng used the momentum to lunge forward a few steps before spinning around instantly, clutching his chest as he glared at the attacker. The man was naked, with only a cloak over his shoulders. He didn't have 3 heads or 6 arms. He looked like a normal human, 1 head and 2 arms. But 2 horns grew from his head, and on his back were massive, fiery red wings, large enough to wrap around his entire body. Chen Meng shared the ship's defense, so the blow wasn't fatal, but it still hurt like hell. And that meant the attack power of that seemingly casual strike had exceeded level 500. He's strong, Chen Meng thought, his heart turning cold. At that moment, everyone in the tunnel knelt in unison, their eyes filled with fanaticism as they looked at the man and chanted, Sadan is immortal. Darkness is eternal. The man before him was Sadan himself. Phew. Chen Meng let out a soft breath and raised a hand to hold Biao Zi and the others back. He looked at Sadan and gave a faint smile. You're not much for clothes, are you? Don't let the guys behind me charge in, he thought. If things get chaotic here, we're dead. Sadan narrowed his eyes at Chen Meng, who was still standing, seemingly uninjured. He was suspicious. That strike just now looked ordinary, but it was his full power in his non-transformed state. The power was immense, yet this person was fine. According to his senses, this was clearly a low-level creature with a very low rank. How could he withstand it? But he didn't show it. His face only wore a nonchalant smile. Humble human. Your perception is as foolish as ever. An adventurer from the human civilization. Congratulations. You found yourself a fine grave. You will die here. Sa-Dan paused for a beat and then continued, as if granting a favor. Of course, you have another choice. If you are willing to tell me the details of the human civilization's inner workings, and tell me how you crossed 780,000 light years to reach the extreme evil civilization, I will spare you. I'll even make you the Knight Commander of the Holy Site, a position of high power and status. This is a promise in the name of Sa-Dan. As soon as he finished speaking, the train managers and Holy Site staff around them looked at Chun Mang with eyes full of both admiration and envy. The Knight Commander of the Holy Site was an extremely high position. In essence, it was like a security chief, but the security chief of the Holy Site was something else entirely. Is that so? Chun Mang replied softly. In the next instant, the brooch on his chest erupted, transforming into the massive Huangxinghao, suspended in the middle of the tunnel. At the same time, he pulled Biao Zi and the others into the refrigerator they had brought, appearing instantly inside the ship's cabin. The tunnel was terrifyingly large and empty. The Huangxinghao had expanded several times and still looked small inside it. With just one clash, Chun Mang knew the opponent was extremely strong. A casual sneak attack was nearly level 500 or even exceeded it. But so what? His armor could repair itself very quickly. As long as the opponent didn't exceed level 500 by too much, they still couldn't break through his armor. Chun Mang reminded himself, don't waste words. A fight is a fight. Don't say a single unnecessary word. As the Huangxinghao appeared, the 6 Acaning photon main cannons on the roof of the car simultaneously lit up with patterns, entering a charging state. Immediately after, a searing light swept across the entire tunnel. 6 level 500 Acaning shots locked onto Sa-Dan and fired with a roar. The rabble in the tunnel were almost instantly vaporized. At this level of combat, standing nearby to watch without sufficient strength was suicide. This was Chun Mang's strongest attack at the moment, the level 500 Acaning photon main cannon. He had never used this level of cannon to deal with an enemy before, so the power was so great that even he had to admit it was staggering. The explosion was earth-shattering, causing the tunnel to nearly collapse instantly. The walls were torn apart, revealing a vast plain outside. The tunnel was just something Sa-Dan had set up. The plain was the true Holy Site. The 6 photon beams, after grinding Sa-Dan into fragments, didn't slow down at all, racing toward the distance. They punched several pitch-black holes into the sky before gradually disappearing into the darkness. Is he dead? Chun Mang looked at the radar. The screen reported no living beings nearby. He had just let out a breath when, boom, a terrifying shockwave hit from the bottom of the ship. The hovering Huangxinghao was sent flying upward by a single punch, tumbling several times in the air before it could stabilize. Car number 7 was nearly shredded by that punch. But thanks to the super effect armor and nanobots, it was stitching itself back together at an insane speed. Chun Mang sat before the control panel, locking onto the massive monster hovering not far away. Its face somewhat resembled the Sa-Dan from before, but its body was several times larger, the skin on its back torn, redder, and harder. The arms that had still looked human were now claws and demon feet, looking twisted as if the joints had been snapped. The fiery red fleshy wings behind it flapped slowly, each stroke accompanied by a whistling wind. And on its body, there wasn't a single wound. Chun Mang's expression changed completely. He knew this fight would be hard, but he didn't expect the opponent to be virtually unscathed. Clearly, the life sign radar had dropped and then disappeared just now. He thought it was truly dead. So this is resurrection? Chun Mang understood immediately. It made sense. If he could resurrect his followers, it wasn't strange that he could resurrect himself. He shifted his gaze to the Doppler radar, scanning the entire area. There couldn't be a resurrection without a cause. There must be a structure or some method acting as an anchor. To kill Sa-Dan, that anchor had to be destroyed first. In his mind, only one thought remained: find the resurrection anchor. Without finding it, the fight will never end. Very good, very good. You're quite something. Sa-Dan hovered high above, looking down at his claws and baring his teeth in a bloodthirsty grin. My past state actually died at your hands. It took me 3,000 years to refine that. It didn't even have time to transform. He looked up at Chun Mang, his voice dropping. Your strength is far beyond what I imagined. At this level, you couldn't be a nobody in the human civilization. In fact, you are very likely the leader. Sa Dan glanced at the cannons on the ship and laughed coldly. A single level 500 canning shot, if I remember correctly, consumes 10 quadrillion units of ore. 6 shots is 60 quadrillion. Throwing 60 quadrillion away like skipping stones. A remote star system of the human civilization. Has it become this wealthy? He took a breath, his smile widening. Excellent. Then there's no need to gather an army. If I can just capture you today, conquering the human civilization will become extremely simple. He spread his wings, his voice suddenly becoming explosive. Next, feel the true form of Sa Dan. Immediately after, the veins all over Sa Dan's body bulged like ropes, his muscles swelling like small mountains. Then they all exploded simultaneously, blood and bones surging to wrap around his body. A roar echoed across the plain, blood slaughter. A pillar of fiery red light, mixed with terrifying destructive force, slammed toward the Huangxinghao. The warning siren shrieked in the cabin. Warning! Warning! Incoming high-energy attack. Level 800. Chun Mang's face went cold, but at that exact moment, he fell into a state of absolute calm. He pushed the control lever down all the way, trying to pull the ship out of the epicenter, while simultaneously slamming the special skill button on the console. Absolute defense. The defense attributes of the Doppler S, the Pi, 7 energy shield level 50, and the level 500 armor stacked on top of each other. The defense jumped to level 550. This was the strongest defense the Huangxinghao could muster, but Chun Mang knew it still wasn't enough. He threw out 2 mineral planets that had already been mined out as scrap, blocking the attack directly. In the next instant, the red light crushed the 2 planets in succession and then slammed into the armor of the Huangxinghao as it dodged to the side. The impact sent the ship tumbling several times. The speakers erupted with all sorts of screams like wailing ghosts. Clearly, the interior of the cabin was a mess, and many had died. Chun Mang clenched his fists. In his mind, there was only one thought. If I can endure this, I win. If not, I retreat. Is that all? Sa Dan was slightly stunned. He was surprised that his strongest attack had caused so little damage. He hadn't figured out why those 2 mineral planets that appeared out of nowhere had weakened the strike so much. But he didn't plan to think about it for long. This opponent was still very strong, so how about one more shot? Sa Dan grinned ferociously and shook his head. The veins on his skin bulged again, then exploded once more, the blood and bone thickening as they wrapped around his body. In his hand, the red light began to condense again. Why aren't you fighting back anymore? Out of resources? Stupid trained civilization. Without resources, you become a paper tiger instantly. My attacks don't require resource consumption. At that moment, inside the Huangxinghao cabin, Xiao AI was busy playing various panic background sounds from Zhang Yiren's database to match the disaster atmosphere. But in reality, it was the opposite. No one on the ship had died. In fact, their combat power was being pushed to an unprecedented level. Chun Mang sat at the control panel, a hint of a smile on his lips, his eyes fixed on the screen. Armor level, 580. After the armor reached level 500, its super effect was to absorb all incoming energy sources and temporarily convert them into defense. He had prepared thoroughly just now, simply because he wasn't sure if the energy source included Sa Dan's type of attack or only counted photon cannons. Since he wasn't sure, he had to prepare 2 paths. Reality proved that Sa Dan's ultimate move was almost completely neutralized by him. It even made him stronger. Chun Mang thought to himself, then it's very clear. What I need to do now is force Sa Dan to throw a few more of those moves. The more he throws, the thicker my armor gets. When the time comes, I'll crush him in return. Just then, another pillar of fiery red light slammed down. This time, the Huangxinghao didn't even dodge. It let itself be hit and sent flying, rolling several times on the ground before slowly regaining its posture and hovering back up. The armor level jumped to 660. In reality, after the energy was absorbed, there was almost no kinetic energy left. Those tumbles were mostly Chun Mang manually controlling the ship to act the part, avoiding revealing his hand too early. Soon, the ship's speakers broadcasted Chun Mang's miserable laugh, intentionally dragging out his breath. That actually hurt. But, at this rate, you can only do that twice in a row, right? Now it's my turn. Oh, saw Dan, who had already intended to charge in and finish it with his fists, hovered in the air, his fleshy red wings flapping. His eyes flashed with contempt and arrogance. Stupid human. It seems you don't understand what Sa Dan is. What a god is. Today, I'll show you the power of a god. In the next instant, the patterns on his fleshy red wings suddenly emitted a deep, bizarre purple light. The space around him distorted violently, cracking open into countless fissures. Behind the fissures was an indistinct blackness, as if something was looking back. Then, countless deep purple fragments slowly rose like a storm, accompanied by Sa Dan's roar, engulfing the entire Huangxinghao. Divine punishment. Boom, boom. Dense explosions echoed repeatedly around the ship's hull. This strike was significantly stronger. The armor hardness of the Huangxinghao was pushed to 760. Is this your limit? Chen Meng watched the numbers jump, his voice still steady. Then it's my turn. Sa Dan suddenly calmed down. His gaze turned cold as he stared at the ship that had just taken divine punishment and only tumbled without a scratch. He began to feel that something was wrong. Initially, a single punch had nearly shredded a car. And yet, this ship had taken several killer moves and was still fine. This wasn't right. A realization struck him. Perhaps this ship is immune to energy attacks, but not to physical attacks. Immediately, he didn't wait for the ship to do anything. With a flick of his fingers, his body vanished, leaving behind dense afterimages. Almost instantly, he appeared on the roof of the Huangxinghao cabin, roared, and slammed a fist down before immediately retreating. He looked at the nearly shattered dent on the cabin armor and the one Acaning photon main cannon he had crushed, then bared his teeth in a grin. Cunning human. Sa Dan has seen through your trick. I forgot to tell you. Energy attacks are just something I was forced to learn to deal with cosmic chaos. The strongest innate trait of the demon race is the physical body. This is my true specialty. In the next instant, Sa Dan roared, ultimate form, activate. His body transformed once again. The veins became even more prominent, purple blood seen flowing turbidly inside, in sharp contrast to the red wings behind him. The sense of explosion and pressure skyrocketed, as if the entire plane was being crushed down. This is going to be tough. Chen Meng sat in the cabin, looking at the crack above his head, his brow furrowed. With just one punch, his level 760 armor had cracked. This was the strongest opponent he had ever faced. He thought to himself, Little Green can't handle this at all. If Little Green dared to swallow him, this guy would punch right through its stomach. At this point, there's only one way. In the next moment, the Huangxinghao shrunk, turned into a brooch, and vanished on the spot. Immediately after, the Huangxinghao appeared in the cosmic void. The radar reported that not far ahead was the level 4987 photon beam that had been flying through the cosmic void for tens of millions of years. Chen Meng pushed the control lever all the way down, charging straight toward it. In his mind, there was only one thought: power source. I must borrow enough power, or going back is just death. He ran. Sa Dan hovered in the air, his divine sense sweeping far and wide. He confirmed the opponent wasn't hiding in a pseudo-dimension, but had truly vanished. His face darkened, looking extremely grim. His past states were all dead, and yet he still let the target escape. It was a massive humiliation. However, this time, the opponent was also heavily injured and had burned through a staggering amount of resources. This was indeed the best time to counterattack. It was just a pity he didn't catch the man. If he could have interrogated him for the location of the wormhole the human civilization had built, he could have saved a lot of resources. What a waste. 60 quadrillion resources thrown away like trash. That ship just now was likely the strongest ship of the human civilization. They must have used some method to learn of the invasion plan and launched a decapitation strike. Sa Dan snorted coldly. He glanced around once and then exited his transformation state. The tunnel he had worked so hard to create was destroyed, and the holy site had several holes in it. Repairing it would be a huge pain. A secondary main energy beam, level 4987. On the Doppler radar, It looked like just a small red dot. But with the naked eye, it was entirely different. In the distance was a pillar of pure light, transcending physical limits. In the pitch-black cosmic void, it was terrifyingly bright. Its brightness even exceeded a supernova explosion. Just touching it would cause any matter to vaporize instantly. Level 4987. No, it has grown to level 4988. This is a terrifying attack. If it reached the Neostar system, it could wipe out the entire system in an instant. It would create a massive cosmic black hole. Star systems within a range of millions of light-years would also find it hard to escape the influence. If Sa-Dan had the means to redirect this kind of attack, if he just threw it into the extreme evil star system, then from now on, the name Sa-Dan would vanish from the universe. In the ship's cabin, Chen Meng looked at the white pillar of light from afar. The space ahead had already begun to distort violently. Even within the light pillar, several tiny black holes appeared faintly due to the shock waves, only to be destroyed immediately. Chen Meng whispered a very short sentence to himself. I have to swallow it. No one survives this strike. The distance was still far, but the tremors had already reached this area. Chen Meng calmly pushed the control lever all the way down. The Huangxinghao accelerated madly, charging straight into the light pillar as if committing suicide. In fact, an ordinary ship would have disintegrated here long ago. He could still charge only because of the armor's super effect. Thanks to that, the hull didn't collapse immediately. But even so, the visual pressure was horrifying. The area of white light in his vision grew larger and larger. Larger still, until it completely swallowed his eyes. Then the ship suddenly shook violently. Immediately after, everything went silent, and Chen Meng went blind. At this moment, he was being treated in the medical bay. When he approached the core, he had looked just once, and his eyeballs exploded instantly within their sockets. That brightness was even greater than a supernova. The light of a star was like a toy in comparison. A supernova is one of the most violent optical phenomena in the universe, yet the light pillar before him was even more violent. Unbelievable. This is a method created by humans. When Chen Meng left the medical bay and returned to the control cabin, he looked at the screen on the console. 39 days had passed since he escaped Sa-Dan's clutches. The light pillar was still right ahead, clearly visible to the naked eye. But to truly reach its core, even at the Huangxinghao speed, it took almost exactly 39 days. Of course, this was because both sides were charging toward each other. The light pillar's speed was even faster. And the ship's armor was now at level 1987, a number enough to make one choke. Chen Meng looked at that number and laughed. Last time he absorbed Sa-Dan's energy attack, the portion converted into armor level was only 1/10. But this time, it was nearly half. The reason was clear. The energy intensity of photon cannons increases exponentially with level. The power of a level 4000 photon cannon isn't 10 times that of a level 400. It's hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of times greater. Just one-digit difference, but it's a different species entirely. A low-level shot can destroy a planet 100,000 kilometers in diameter. A high-level one can erase a star system hundreds of thousands of light-years wide. In such a star system, the number of planets that size is at least in the trillions. Chen Meng gripped the armrest. In his mind, there was only one rhythm. This time, it's my turn. He used the refrigerator to return to the holy site the same way he came. Appearing back in the tunnel, it was clear that after 39 days, Sa-Dan had patched up the damage from the previous battle. No hesitation. He fired another level 200 Acaning secondary main energy cannon. The tunnel was instantly wiped out, and the flat plain was revealed again. A level 200 Acaning shot only cost 100 million units of iron ore, while a level 500 only cost 100 billion. In the Huangxinghao, the iron ore reserves were in the quadrillions. As long as his defense didn't break, he could completely crush Sa-Dan with resources alone. 99.99% of the energy cannon's resource consumption was drawn from the Huangxinghao's hold. He only had to pay 0.01%. The thing the civilization provided served as a level 500 foundation. He used it like a basic attack. He told himself, very simply, just keep firing until he dies. In the next instant, A furious roar echoed through the ship's speakers. Sa-Dan transformed back into his strongest form, deep purple veins bulging, fiery red wings flapping hard as he hovered in the air. His face was ferocious as he spat out the words. "Do you have any idea how long it took me to build that tunnel?" He gnashed his teeth. "This time, I'm not letting you run." Immediately after, Sa-Dan charged straight up. This time he didn't open with an energy attack, clearly having learned his lesson. Afterimage upon afterimage, he appeared on the roof of the Huangxinghao cabin in the blink of an eye. He let out a shout and slammed a full power punch into the armor. With each punch, space itself shattered like glass. The train managers and staff in the holy site exploded into blood and bone under the aftershocks. As for the armor, there wasn't even a scratch. Perfect. Intact. The ship's hull didn't even vibrate. Sa-Dan froze. How is this possible? He took a sharp breath, his face becoming even more savage, and then he began punching like rain. Every punch was enough to tear space apart. Chen Meng sat in the cockpit, feeling almost nothing. He leaned back in his chair, watching the scene on the screen and laughing softly. Level 2000 armor. The sense of security really is different. Before coming here, to be safe, he had upgraded 2 permanent damping accessories and internal space stabilizers to level 500. So right now, he sat still as if he were watching a movie. No shaking, no vibration, no sensation of being hit. Level 2000 armor provided a nearly absurd level of peace of mind. He felt a brief pang of regret because it was only temporary. To truly stabilize the armor at this level would require a massive amount of resources. Combining the extreme evil star system and the Nia star system might not even be enough. But after swallowing the extreme evil civilization this time, he could at least fix the armor at level 1000. He thought quickly, level 1000 armor is enough to squeeze Sa-Dan to death. In his strongest form, Sa-Dan's energy attack was at most 800 or 900. It hadn't even touched 1000. Confusion began to flash in Sa-Dan's eyes. He stopped, panting. How many punches had he thrown? The armor was still as smooth as new. In this situation, he searched his memory for a long time before pulling out a phrase. A gap too large to break defense. How long had it been since he encountered this? The opponent had only been gone for a few dozen days. How could he have leaped to the point where his full power strikes were useless? Just as Sa-Dan was still stunned, he didn't notice that behind him, 5 Acaning photon main cannons had already deployed outside the ship and finished charging long ago. By the time he reacted, it was too late. 5 extremely powerful photon beams tore through his physical defense. His body was instantly turned into blood and bone, vaporized by the pillars of light. Chen Meng looked at the Doppler radar screen and clicked his tongue. Is he finally dead this time? Surely he won't resurrect again. Xiao AI's voice rang through the ship. It seems so, Captain. Chen Meng was just about to let out a breath when he saw that in front of the ship, Sa-Dan, who had been ground to dust, was gathering and manifesting again. Still naked, but this time his body looked much more solid, the blood in his veins pitch black. The fiery red wings on his back had also turned an absolute black. Hovering high above, his aura was heavy enough to crush everything. His burning gaze pierced through the front glass, locking onto Chen Meng, and he grinned ferociously, enunciating every word. Congratulations. You are the first to see my future state. Chen Meng frowned, looking at Sa-Dan engulfed in black mist, his massive black fleshy wings flapping wildly in the air. He spoke softly, his voice cold. This thing really is annoying. He immediately decided one thing. Don't let him get close again. The patterns on the Acaning photon main cannons on the roof began to glow white, entering another charging phase. But this time, Sa-Dan didn't give him time. In his future state, both his strength and speed far exceeded before. His speed nearly touched the speed of light. He charged at the bow of the Huangxinghao so fast the naked eye couldn't keep up. Then he unleashed an extremely heavy full-power punch, as if trying to shatter space itself. With a direct punch, the Huangxinghao was knocked high into the air. The force of this punch was too great. The hull couldn't maintain its trajectory and was sent flying like a piece of scrap metal. However, very quickly, Sa-Dan's voice rang out, full of shock. How can this be? Even my future state can't break the armor? Just how high is your ship's armor level? Chen Mang didn't intend to answer. He only glanced at the control screen and read a single number. Attack energy, level 1,300. He's strong. He cursed silently. This is insane. Is this the kind of power a normal level 4 civilization should have? The mechanical civilization, at level 3, had a maximum attack of only around 300. Yet a casual punch from Sa Dan in his future state reached 1,300. Truly a freak. The energy storage was complete. It was just that Sa Dan was too fast, making it hard to lock onto the target, but that didn't matter. A level 500 photon cannon had a massive coverage area. There was no need for a hard lock. Immediately after, 5 level 500 Acaning beams fired, tearing through space in 5 directions. No matter how fast Sa Dan was, he had to take at least one hit. And yet, as if intentionally insulting him, at the moment of firing, Sa Dan stopped in midair, calmly standing within the wash of one of the cannons. He was so at ease he even bared his teeth in a grin. Is that all? Then it's my turn to perform. Sa Dan roared. Heavenly cage. Black mist erupted from him, turning into countless chains that locked down the entire space. Hovering high above, he looked directly at Chun Mang through the front glass and laughed. Last time you came, your armor was only level 500. Yet in just a few dozen days, it rose to a level even my future state can't break. I think this isn't your true armor level. Your current armor must be at least level 1,500. To raise it to that number in such a short time, the resources and Morphe stones consumed. Even selling the entire Milky Way wouldn't be enough. In my heavenly cage, no one escapes. When the time limit for this little trick ends, I want to see how you deal with me. He narrowed his eyes, his voice turning cold. Sa Dan cannot be provoked. Only your blood can wash away this shame. Immediately after, Sa Dan lunged, grabbing the tail of the Huangxing Hao and swinging it like a whip, repeatedly slamming it into the ground. The ground immediately formed solid, deep craters. The space where the hull swept through also cracked, spatial fragments flashing and then vanishing. If this holy site weren't so reinforced, any ordinary planet would have been smashed to pieces by now. Sa Dan's explosive power in his future state was truly terrifying. Chen Mang sat firmly in the cockpit. The ship was being tossed back and forth, but thanks to the space stabilizers, the interior remained as steady as still water. He frowned at the screen. I can't create a wormhole. I can't contact the refrigerator outside this zone. I can't broadcast civilization signals. I can't use the ship's radio. Every way out of here, every communication channel to the outside, has been cut off. Those black bone chains have completely sealed off this space. My armor can only last for 24 hours. If this blockade lasts longer than that, I really will have no way out but death. Chen Mang reached a conclusion in his mind, very concisely, then kill him. There's only one path left, kill Sa Dan. The level 500 Acaning photon main cannon isn't enough. I can push it to level 1000. He opened the Acaning photon main cannon accessory info and simultaneously checked his iron or balance. Currently, there were 1,989 quadrillion units left. Upgrading this 7-colored accessory to level 1000 required 1,000 quadrillion. Extremely expensive. Exactly half of his reserves would evaporate. But this was no time for regrets. What are resources for if not to be used in this moment of life and death? As long as I win, the resources taken from the extreme evil star system will be enough to compensate. In war, if you win, you don't lose. If you lose, you're doomed forever. No hesitation. Chun Mang withdrew 1,000 quadrillion iron ore and upgraded the Acaning photon main cannon to level 1000. At the same time, he received a new super effect. Anyone killed by this weapon will be erased from the timeline. Permanent death, with no means of resurrection. Past, present, and future, all dead. Chen Mang's eyes lit up. He whispered a short sentence, exactly what I need. With this effect, as long as I land a hit this time, Sa Dan will truly die. No more waiting for future states. He felt a brief pang of regret. If only I'd upgraded sooner, I could have avoided all this trouble. But whatever, it's still in time. A level 500 shot cost 100 billion iron ore. A level 1000 shot cost a staggering 10 quadrillion. The price increased 100-fold. The power will surely be on a different level as well. No delay. While the ship was still being swung like a whip by Sa-Dan, the patterns on the newly upgraded level 1000 Acaning photon main cannon began to shimmer. Terrifying energy gradually condensed, silent, cold, like something being dragged from the bottom of the universe. Clearly, Sa-Dan was too overconfident right now. He knew the main cannon was charging, but he had no intention of dodging. He continued to use his strength to slam the ship into the ground like he was kneading a toy. Chen Meng watched the scene, and only one thought crossed his mind. This kind of confidence is either stupidity or true immortality. A minute later, the level 1000 Acaning photon main cannon finally finished charging and began to roar. The star within the Huangxinghao cabin spun at an incredible speed, then shrunk visibly to the naked eye. Searing flames erupted, covering the entire holy site. If there were any survivors left before, they were surely wiped out completely this time. At such close range, there was absolutely no need to lock onto the target. The cannon's beam filled the entire field of vision. Unstoppable, unavoidable. Space was torn apart, and pitch-black cracks opened up everywhere. A deafening sound echoed through heaven and earth. Countless pillars of searing white light, like divine punishment, swept across Sa-Dan. The power of this strike was so terrifying that if you lined up every planet in the Neostar system, this shot would be enough to pierce through and blow up hundreds of billions of them. The level 1000 Acaning photon main cannon was 100 times stronger than the level 500. The scene was equivalent to a supernova explosion. This kind of power shouldn't belong to a mortal. But just then, Chen Meng heard Sa-Dan's crazed laughter. Outside the window, the searing white light rose like an ocean. Chen Meng put on sunglasses and bowed his head, not daring to look directly at his own shot. He kept his eyes glued to the Doppler radar and saw something that made his blood run cold. Sa-Dan showed no sign of losing life. The laughter was so piercing that Chen Meng naturally fell silent. Sa-Dan didn't dodge. He took it head-on. And not only was he not heavily injured, he acted as if nothing had happened. For the first time, Chen Meng felt the despair of such a gap. It was heavier than all the previous times. This time he had given it his all, and it was still useless. The escape route was also blocked. I can't win. I must find a way to run. He told himself, very briefly, survive first, then we'll see. Chen Meng spoke softly. Xiao AI, scour the ship's potential. Is there any way to escape? He glanced at the time recall option on the control screen. It had turned gray. Even if he hid in the past timeline, he could only stay for 10 minutes before being pulled back. Useless. And now, even that useless option couldn't be used. The Black Mist Chain prison has completely blocked this space. No escape. Chen Meng asked further. Can't we use the refrigerator at the Blue Star either? Xiao AI replied. Biao Zi's side already tried. It's not working. The refrigerators temporarily cannot connect. They've been isolated. Chen Meng gave a small nod. He reviewed every card in his hand, and then considered a very dirty move. Should he reveal the existence of the Neostar system? Maybe he could drag those at the higher levels down with him to deal with Sa-Dan. But he dismissed it quickly. Last time he killed a lesser god, the laws of the universe noticed and rewarded him. At that time, every corner of his existence had likely been scrutinized. If this were truly serious, he would have been erased then. So most likely, dragging others down wouldn't work. Then Chen Meng suddenly remembered something. The civilization relic he got after killing the lesser god, Shinji. A killing intent relic. The effect was, consume energy to activate, unleashing a full power strike from a deity. The attack range was equivalent to the radar range. The strike had the attributes of absolute hit and absolute armor piercing. No one could block it. The power had no number. It was simply stated as a deity's full power strike. If a deity was only at the level of a lesser god, then it might just be trash. He had never tried it because the price was too painful. Each use cost 1,000 quadrillion iron ore. But it had one deadly advantage. It activated almost instantly within the radar range. His Doppler radar currently reached 1 million light-years. Meaning if he activated it now, a divine envoy hundreds of thousands of light-years away could still strike Sa-Dan directly. Chen Meng paused for a beat. In his mind, a very short sentence popped up. This is my last card. At that moment, the searing light gradually faded, and the entire plain turned into a desolate wasteland. The ground was covered in carbon crystals formed after the extreme heat, and the air still smelled of gunpowder. Sa Dan's laughter echoed everywhere. He stopped his assault and stood right in front of the ship's window. He crossed his arms and stared into Chun Mang's eyes through the glass, his voice mocking. "Helpless now, aren't you?" He curled his lip. The energy of that strike just now was very strong, far beyond what a level 4 civilization should have. It's truly unbelievable. A civilization that just ascended to level 4 in a remote star system having such means, you short-term explosive types, are even more terrifying than long-standing level 4 civilizations. He paused, his voice sinking. "It's just a pity you met me." Sa Dan sneered. "I told you, I am in my future state. My defense level is also in a future state." He tilted his head. "Do you understand what that means?" He answered himself, his voice growing more delighted. "It means, what you are seeing is the me of the future. But the attack you fired is only from the present. How can you use a present attack to injure the future me?" He bared his teeth. This is the unique ability of the demon race, usable only once in a lifetime. He slowly folded his arms, as if granting a reward. "You're good. Pushing me to this point. You have enough to be proud of, even in death. Not everyone is qualified to see the future state of a demon. In this state, I am invincible." He laughed loudly. "Even if the star system is destroyed, I am eternally immortal." He spread his arms wide and leaned over the glass to look straight at Chun Mang. "Unless you find me in the future, that is the only way to kill me, because the power I am using is borrowed from the future." Then he let out a breath, his voice full of pity. "But the future is unpredictable, and no one can travel to it, not even God-level civilizations. So how could you possibly do it?" Chun Mang looked at Sa Dan squatting on the bow of the ship, as arrogant as a master. He was silent for a moment, then laughed softly. "You're quite confident." In his mind, there was only one thought. Then let's see whose absolute is more absolute. He reached out and pressed a button on the control panel. Immediately after, 1,000 quadrillion units of iron ore in the storage hold turned to ash. And Shinji, hundreds of thousands of light years away, was activated simultaneously. Chun Mang knew very well that Sa Dan's future state was an absolute defense. Forget his level 1,000 decaying main cannon. Even level 2,000 might not break it. As for level 5,000, hard to say. Level 5,000 could tear this space apart instantly, creating a massive black hole. Even if it didn't break the armor, Sa Dan wouldn't escape the terrifying gravitational pull and would be imprisoned forever in the heart of the black hole. But that was something he didn't have yet. He could only bet everything on Shinji. Absolute armor-piercing versus absolute defense. Let's see which absolute is truly one level higher. He told himself, very briefly, just hit him. In a place hundreds of thousands of light years away, in the void of space, a void portal opened like a wormhole. From it poured countless streams of green seawater, molten iron ore. It drenched the Shinji civilization relic. Shinji, which had been withered, gradually began to emit a pink glow. The glow gathered, creating a naked spirit body holding a long spear. It looked fragile, but its gaze seemed to pierce through hundreds of thousands of light years, locking onto the extreme, evil star system. The spirit leaned back, tensed its muscles, took a step to build momentum, and then the pink energy spear in its hand tore through the space in front of it, firing deep into the universe. In the next instant, the pitch-black sky of the cosmic void brightened. A pillar of blinding white light engulfed the area, but it came and went quickly. Where it passed, there was absolute silence. Space did not shatter. There was no heat. All the power was tightly compressed within the spearhead, not a single bit leaking out. What escaped was only light. In just a few seconds, the spear crossed 500,000 or 600,000 light years. This speed was rarely seen in the entire universe. Things like cosmic behemoths modified into space mines were nothing before it. This was the full power strike of a deity. At the same time, Sa Dan in the holy site seemed to sense something. He looked toward the distance, hesitated for a beat, and then threw a poisonous sentence at Chun Mang. "I'll let you go today. The day my fleet reaches the human civilization is the day you die." Immediately after, he waved his hand to dissolve the heavenly cage, preparing to leave this place. Clearly, that prison also blocked him, but it was too late. Almost in the very next moment, Sa-Dan's body stiffened, blood erupting from his throat. He looked down and saw a pink spear that had appeared out of nowhere, already impaled straight through his chest. His eyes were full of fear and horror, and only then did the pain slowly wash over him, as if it were being stretched out to torture him. He hadn't even seen the spearhead arrive. He hadn't seen its trajectory, and his divine sense hadn't caught it. Just now, he only had a vague sense of unease, urging him to leave immediately. Logically speaking, he was currently invincible. Even if the extreme evil star system were destroyed, he would live. But right now, he felt his life force draining away rapidly. His absolute defense isn't absolute anymore. Sa-Dan's legs gave out. He fell to his knees, then toppled forward, face-planting into the dirt. The fear of his life force draining away made him want to tear through space to escape, but that once simple task was now impossible no matter how hard he tried. He wanted to self-destruct and take everyone with him, destroying the stockpile so Chun Mang would have nothing left, but he couldn't even do that. He wanted to turn his head to look at Chun Mang one last time. He couldn't even manage that. He could only lie there, listening to the rhythm of his own life fading away. An unprecedented wave of fear and despair washed over him. A few seconds later, Sa-Dan's pupils dilated. His corpse slowly shriveled up, as if every drop of moisture had been sucked out. Chun Mang looked at the Doppler radar and muttered to himself, "This time, he's definitely dead for good." 15 minutes later, he stepped off the ship and stood beside Sa-Dan's remains. He gave the body a light nudge with his toe, then pulled the crimson spear from the demon's back and held it up to inspect it. "This spear? I just burned exactly 1 quadrillion iron ore to get it. It was painfully expensive, but it feels warm in my hand, like holding a piece of jade. It doesn't even glow." He clearly remembered the scene on the control screen just now. A nameless, naked god had thrown this spear. All its power was perfectly compressed inside, without a single leak. It was an incredible feat. Furthermore, the Crimson Spear's full power hadn't even been unleashed yet. When it actually explodes, that's when the real power hits. That meant this spear could be used a second time, and the next strike would be even more devastating. Chun Mang thought to himself, very sharp. A new trump card. A new potential tier weapon for the planet-class cargo ship. He tossed the spear in his hand and laughed. That quadrillion was well spent. Sa-Dan was truly dead now. Before, the Doppler radar had been jammed by him, leaving Chun Mang practically blind. But now, all sorts of information began to surface. This place was like a pocket dimension created by Sa-Dan. And all the resources he had hoarded over the years were stored right here. The numbers were truly astronomical. He had originally planned to use them to raise an army against human civilization, but that was over now. In that case, Chun Mang would reluctantly accept them. After all, letting them go to waste wasn't a good habit. With just one glance around, he knew he had broken even and then some. Sorting through loot was both a hassle and a joy. There wasn't a single soul left in the Holy Land. Under Xiao AI's coordination, a swarm of mining robots moved like worker ants. They continuously transported resources from the Holy Land stockpile into the ship. This was his spoils of war, along with a bunch of other miscellaneous items. Things he understood and things he didn't. For example, some items looked like special ritual offerings, but it didn't matter. He just shoved them all onto the ship. Sa-Dan was dead. The strongest opponent he had ever faced, with a peak attack power reaching level 1300. It sounded absurd, but in the end, he still fell by Chun Mang's hand. His greatest reliance was the divine silence civilization wonder. To be honest, when he pressed the button, Chun Mang wasn't even sure it would work. He just wanted to see if he could break Sa-Dan's absolute defense, planning to follow up with his own strike. But the actual effect was better than imagined. That full power strike had finished Sa-Dan off before it even fully erupted. Without any trouble, Chun Mang exhaled, with only one word in his mind. In the cockpit, he sat down and flipped through the information recovered from Sa-Dan's palace. The demon race was a very unique race in the universe. Every member had 3 lives, a racial trait. They consisted of the past state, the present state, and the future state. The past was the weakest, and the future was the strongest. Normally, unless they were cultivating, demons would appear in their past state because the three lives had to progress from low to high. If they pulled out their future state right at the start and got killed, they'd lose everything. There wouldn't be any 3 lives left. The future state could only be used once and lasted for a maximum of 24 hours. So Sadan had been bluffing. That talk about hundreds of days was a lie. Furthermore, once used, their strength would be permanently fixed at whatever their present state was before they entered the future state. It was equivalent to cutting off their own potential. There would be no more room for growth. He also read about something else. Sadan was also a runaway, or rather, he had been forced to leave. Sadan was just a name he gave himself. His true identity was the third prince of the demon race, a man of high status and great power. To grow in strength, the demon race needed pure faith in addition to resources. They didn't need ink jade. Breaking through realms relied primarily on faith. Every ambitious demon had to develop followers. The stronger their ability to charm, the more followers they had, and the faster their strength grew. Sadan was slightly more talented than most, so he had gathered many loyal followers. The surge in power caused him to lose control. He had disgraced the queen and was subsequently exiled from the demon race. The demon emperor had casually tossed him into a random one-way wormhole to fend for himself. He drifted to the extreme evil star system and began raising followers there. The demon race's civilization was called the Demon Civilization, a level 6 civilization. In the universe, this was a top-tier powerhouse civilization. After reading this, Chen Mang sighed. He felt a tiny spark of envy. If only humans had 3 states too. The will of the universe was truly biased. Humans had no racial traits at all, while even the forest elves had them. Just then, Chen Mang paused. He saw an extremely noteworthy piece of information. So-called faith accessories were something the demons had researched, combining faith with equipment. Through these accessories, they could often create many miraculous things. For example, reviving crew members. This kind of effect was something he had only seen in faith accessories. As much as he wanted it, he couldn't use it. Even if countless people worshipped him as a god, he still couldn't collect the power of faith. He couldn't gather it, couldn't store it, and couldn't condense it. This wasn't something that could be learned later. It could only be a racial trait. Chen Mang muttered to himself, very short. I'm definitely jealous. But before leaving, Sadan had stolen quite a bit of core information from the demon civilization. It contains a wealth of research data on various components. All of it was stored in Sadan's ship database, and now it's in Chen Mang's hands. With this data, the research and development capabilities of the planetary train will leap to a whole new level. That's right, Sadan had his own personal ship. He just couldn't bring himself to burn resources on building and upgrading it. He poured everything into his own body, so he didn't bring it out during the fight. After Sadan died, everyone on that ship died with him. Xiao AI automatically collected all the data from the ship's AI. Thanks to that, Chen Mang learned many new things. There are things you can't squeeze out even through interrogation because you need a lead to ask the right questions. And at that time, he didn't have any leads at all. As for Sadan, it was impossible for him to remember every single detail. Among the pile of data, one line made Chen Mang frown slightly. The demon civilization came from the second universe. They aren't native to the first universe. They are outsiders. The second universe, it was the first time he'd heard of it. If put in terms humans on Earth would understand, the second universe is the underworld, the netherworld. The universe they are currently in is the first universe. Everyone who dies in the first universe, if their soul remains intact, will fall into the second universe to continue living. But if you die in the second universe, that is true death. The greatest dream for many civilizations in the second universe is to escape into the first universe. In the second universe, the competition is beyond fierce. People there aren't limited by lifespan. As long as they don't cross over to the first universe, they are essentially immortal. However, they cannot have children. Because of this, the population is far more massive than in the first universe. The more people there are, the heavier the competition. All competition stems from resources, and resource scarcity is driven to the extreme by the population. If there were fewer people, there would naturally be enough resources to go around. The first and second universes are like yin and yang, separated and never intersecting. There are still civilizations and ships in the second universe, but they are called hell trains. Except for special cases, only those from the first universe can travel to the second. As for those in the second universe, they absolutely cannot escape to the first. At the very least, Sadan certainly couldn't return to the second universe. To return, one must keep their soul intact. And there was another line that startled Chen Mang. Burning joss paper and incense actually works. Even though the two universes are separated, the people in the second universe originally transferred over from the first. So if your relatives die and you sincerely burn incense and joss paper for them in the first universe, that power of remembrance will invisibly connect to the other side, transforming into a certain amount of resources to give them some capital in the second universe. It's not much, but at least it's enough for food. Of course, your relatives on the other side might not remember you. Most people who go to the second universe have their memories of the first universe wiped. Only a very few lucky ones keep them, though keeping them might not be a blessing. Having those memories only makes life on the other side feel more miserable. Chen Mang pondered. I've burned incense for quite a few people. I guess it really was useful. He called out, Xiao AI. Compile a list of everyone who has sacrificed themselves for the ship over the years. Tell old Chu to make a giant incense stick. Keep it burning continuously for 24 hours. Xiao AI replied immediately, understood. Should we arrange for a group of people to die and go to the second universe, first to scout, making it easier for a future invasion? Chen Mang glanced at her. Why don't you go die first? Xiao AI replied calmly. If the captain's AI dies, it isn't eligible to enter the second universe. Chen Mang paused for a beat and said, Stop with the nonsense. That's the netherworld. Resources are scarce over there, far worse than the first universe. I'm immortal. I'm not going to the second universe in this lifetime. In his mind, he added one more thing. If I go, I might not be able to come back. He didn't know how the demon civilization had escaped the second universe. But he was sure of one thing. Even if the members of the demon civilization die now, they can never return to the second universe. The second universe will not accept them. As for ways to reach the second universe other than death, he still didn't know. Unless he found a way to throw a refrigerator over there. But he immediately dismissed the thought. The refrigerator probably hadn't reached the level of cross-universe travel yet. He used to fantasize about building a hell train. He didn't expect it to actually exist. Chen Mang began to wonder how the components of a hell train differed from his own ship's parts. And if he ever did fall into hell, would his level 0 authority still work? The second universe. On a lonely planet with reddish-brown soil, a man in rags was kneeling on the ground, his panicked eyes fixed on the porcelain bowl in his hand. He knew one thing for certain. He was dead, and after dying, he appeared here. He didn't remember why he died or what had happened before. His memory was a complete blank. He only remembered that when he first woke up, a man in a uniform thrust this bowl into his hand and said simply, This is the world after death. Everyone here is immortal in the sense that they don't age. As long as they aren't killed by someone else, they live forever. When relatives in the living world prepare to burn joss paper, light incense, or perform any act of remembrance, the past life bowl in his hand will glow. Once they are finished, that energy of remembrance will be converted into resources for use in this world. Initially, he was worried because he didn't know if he had any relatives or children. If he had died alone, or if his children never remembered him, then his path to survival was effectively cut off. But he soon felt relieved. Not long after, the porcelain bowl glowed. It meant someone was preparing to burn incense for him. However, the light flickered out as soon as it appeared, failing to condense into resources. He asked around and found out that this happens when a relative thinks about burning incense but doesn't actually go through with it. From then on, he just waited with pleading eyes. The bowl would occasionally flicker, giving him hope, only to die out again. Over and over it went, until he gradually fell into despair, becoming a starving ghost. No one starved to death in hell. But if you didn't have money to buy food, the hunger would cling to you, twisting your gut, torturing you endlessly. It hurt so much that once, he dug out his own organs and ate them. After that, he didn't dare do it again. He had no money for a doctor, no one to stitch him up. He clutched his stomach and dragged himself around for a long time before the wound slowly healed on its own. You could earn money by working here, but you had to register for household registration first. To register, you had to pay a minimum fee. This starting fee usually had to come from the remembrance resources converted from relatives lighting incense. Without it, trying to earn enough on your own before registering was practically a dead end. At least, he couldn't do it. In hell, bodies were as cheap as dirt. He saw with his own eyes many starving ghosts in the market chopping off their lower halves to sell. After all, they wouldn't die. But in hell, no one bought single-use items. It was too much of a loss. People bought the whole set to take home and use gradually to get their money's worth. Only if your looks were exceptionally outstanding could you sell individual sessions. Otherwise, no one would even glance at you. He tried it too. Someone looked over. He gritted his teeth and chopped it off on the spot. And then, no one bought it. So there was no shortage of starving ghosts in hell, and he didn't even know how many days he had been starving. Anything edible around the city had been scavenged clean. Unable to bear it any longer, he dragged himself out of the city again, keeping his face close to the ground, searching for anything to chew on. Just then, a voice hoarse from hunger sounded behind him. Brother Kalza. He had forgotten his real name. He only vaguely remembered being called Kalza, so he just took that as his name. The person behind him continued, voice trembling. Stop looking. Everything around here is gone. There's only red dirt left. Eating it will just give you stomach cramps. Why don't we try the swamp? I heard there's still food there and resources. If we manage to dig something up, we can register, get a job, and at least have full stomachs from then on. In the extreme evil star system, within the Holy Land, a pocket dimension opened by Satan. By now, the resources in that space had been almost entirely gathered and transferred straight into the planetary train. This was practically all the resources the extreme evil civilization could scrape together. The extreme evil civilization still had a leader, but the leader was just a puppet. The one truly in power was Satan behind the scenes. The resources prepared for war naturally fell into Satan's hands as well. The amount was unbelievably massive. From this battle alone, the haul far exceeded the total of everything Chen Mang had ever accumulated before. Without even counting the miscellaneous items, the resources alone were an astronomical figure. Mainly iron ore, 7,892 trillion units. This expedition not only covered all the expenses, but also yielded a massive profit. On the planetary train, Chen Mang stared at the data panel on the control screen and let out a long breath. In the last battle, he had practically thrown his entire fortune onto the table. But this 7,892 trillion units of iron ore brought everything back, even pushing his reserves to their highest point ever. He muttered to himself, "It's enough. This time, it's truly enough." Then he thought further, sharp and cold. The Naya star system is really dirt poor. Even if I flipped the whole bottom over, I couldn't dig up this much. He understood clearly that this was also the entire reserve of the extreme evil star system, scraped completely clean, leaving nothing behind. The extreme evil civilization had originally planned to migrate to the Naya star system, so they had previously mined almost every mineable or planet in the extreme evil star system. Only about 70% of the planets remained unmined. But those were all planets with extremely low yields. To mine them, you'd have to specifically open a separate wormhole, and doing that would result in a heavy loss. It wasn't worth it at all. These barren planets were usually left behind, treated as opportunities for the unranked civilizations nearby. In this universe, even unranked civilizations, or even those that hadn't left a 0.1 light-year radius, always had a planet of their own waiting for them. And usually, no one bothered to fight you for it. That was also why new blood civilizations kept popping up, constantly upgrading. If all civilizations could go straight to any planet without building wormholes or paying any price, then no one in this universe would ever upgrade again. The order of civilizations would freeze, and there wouldn't even be any rankings left. The god-tier civilizations would slice the universe like a cake, dividing the shares and devouring all the resources in their territories. It was precisely because of the existence of countless abundant, yet barren planets like these that the universe still had room for newcomers to rise. A day later, Chen Mang began his journey back. He didn't wipe out the extreme evil civilization completely, but left them to continue living in the extreme evil star system. It was just that, having lost Satan's backing and that massive resource vault, invading other star systems was now practically impossible for them. Even if they were attacked by another level 4 civilization right now, the outcome would basically just be annihilation. Of course, if they survived long enough, many years later, when those barren or planets accumulated some resources, they might still have a chance to rise again. But for now, the extreme evil civilization would no longer have a voice in this region. That was fine. Chun Mang steered the planetary train through the wormhole, watching the bizarre sights drifting along the tunnel walls, a slight smirk on his lips. He told himself, there were risks, and it was dangerous, but as long as the final result is beautiful enough, that's all that matters. With this batch of resources, he could upgrade all his components again, including the train's armor. He could finally push it up another level. He also had a very pragmatic thought. If only every star system was as sensible as the extreme evil civilization, gathering all their resources in one place. Once I win, I just scoop it up and leave. Saves me the time of rummaging around. So much easier. Very soon, he returned to the Naya star system, hovering in space, opening the train's log to check the status of the components. The damaged parts had all been repaired. Only one level 500 Akana light energy main cannon, which Satan had smashed to pieces during their first encounter a few months ago, was beyond recovery. The planetary train is currently missing one main cannon. Only 5 remain, but that's enough. Among the 5, one is level 1000, and the other 4 are level 500. He wasn't going to wait any longer. He planned to use his recent reserves to upgrade everything at once. The first item he targeted was smoothness. This was the first functional component he ever owned, and it had saved him many times during his weakest stages. During the decisive battle against that race, he had collected a massive amount of spider silk. It had all been sucked into the train by the high-strength magnet, totaling hundreds of trillions of units. Smoothness was currently at level 500. It only took 100 trillion units of spider silk to push it to level 1000. Spider silk was basically only used to upgrade smoothness. It didn't have much use otherwise. As for effects like web shooting or binding, they weren't significant for the planetary train anymore. He decided quickly, without hesitation. He immediately consumed 100 trillion units of spider silk, boosting smoothness straight to level 1000. At that moment, a brand new transcendent effect appeared. The level 1000 effect of smoothness, spatial breakthrough. It allowed free travel between the first universe and the second universe. Chun Mang stared at those words, silent for a long time. He understood the patterns of his own progression. Level 200 was a god-tier turning point. Every component reached a new quality at that mark. Level 500 was universe tier, where one began to touch the rules. As for level 1000, he didn't want to give it a fancy name, but one word kept popping into his head: ultimate. He had almost reached the very end. He didn't know what the level cap for components was, or if the laws of the universe had it locked. But his intuition told him that level 1000 was very close to the finish line. Anything higher might be the power of a true god. Currently, the train only had 4 level 1000 components: the telescope, the high-strength magnet, the A-probability main cannon, and smoothness. Except for the level 1000 transcendent effect of the magnet, which was almost empty, the other 3 were insanely overpowered. Even without an effect, the magnet's base attributes were heaven-defying, capable of manipulating planets and pulling gravity fields. He only knew about the second universe because of the information Sadan had left behind. Before this, he thought he might never step foot in there, or at least not for a very, very long time. He was confident that unless a high-level civilization suddenly intervened, he was nearly impossible to kill. He didn't expect the chance to reach the second universe to come so soon. If not for the data he took from Sadan, he might not even understand what the second universe was, let alone understand what the level 1000 effect of smoothness was actually talking about. Xiao AI, Chun Mang mused. Does this mean I can revive infinitely now? If I die and end up in the second universe, it won't matter. I'll just drive the train and use smoothness to return to the first universe. It doesn't work like that. Xiao AI's voice quickly rang out in the cabin. Captain, you've misunderstood. A person can only enter the second universe if their soul is intact. Given the battles you're facing now, if you lose, it's almost impossible to keep your soul whole, Xiao AI said bluntly. For example, if you had lost to Sadan just now, I'm certain he wouldn't have let your soul die in one piece. Secondly, even if the soul is intact, there's only a certain probability of entering the second universe, not a guarantee. Total death is still a possibility, Xiao AI continued. Finally, even if your soul is intact and you're lucky enough to enter the second universe, the train won't follow you, and your memory will be wiped there. You still wouldn't be able to escape. This component won't help you revive. Its greatest use is likely helping you preview the world after death or making preparations in the second universe beforehand. That way, if you encounter a powerful enemy and unfortunately die, provided your luck is good enough, you can rely on those preparations to live a less miserable life over there. Chen Meng leaned back in his chair and lit a cigarette. His voice softened, sounding like someone burning spirit money for himself in advance. He chuckled softly, but his eyes were cold. To be honest, a guy like me has no parents and no children. It really is a good idea to prepare some spirit money for myself, just in case no one's around to burn any when I'm gone. I just wonder if this counts. Can I put it on my tab? In his mind, he had already decided on the optimal use for this effect. If it wasn't for revival, it had to be used as a fallback plan or for profit. Sadan's train database mentioned that the second universe also had trains. They were called hell trains, and there were all sorts of resource mines there too. Chen Meng immediately thought further ahead. The two worlds were almost completely disconnected, so prices would definitely be different. And a difference in price meant a margin. A margin meant profit. He felt he could become a smuggler between the two worlds, taking the opportunity to reap a massive profit. He glanced at the other components. He wasn't in a hurry to test the second universe just yet. First, he had to be prepared enough, heavy enough, and unkillable enough. The task at hand was to push the train's hull armor to level 1000. He frowned at the cost. It was outrageously expensive. It was even more expensive than upgrading a 7-color component to level 1000. It was hard to believe this was the cost for a green-tier component. It required a total of 3,750 trillion units of iron ore, equivalent to upgrading 3.757-color components to level 1000. But he didn't hesitate. He told himself it was worth it. Soon, the 3,750 trillion units of iron ore he had just acquired were incinerated, turning into dust that merged into the hull. The train's armor thickened layer by layer. A heavy, somber sensation spread even through the vacuum of space. Chen Meng looked at it, and a very real thought crossed his mind. With this armor, he'd even dare to drive the train into a star for a bath. Even a star would struggle to burn through this. Immediately after, a new transcendent effect appeared. The level 1000 transcendent effect of the hull armor, eternal and indestructible. After taking a physical hit, the armor absorbs all physical damage regardless of level, then uses it to temporarily boost the train's armor level for 24 hours. Chen Meng's smile froze just as it began to spread. His eyes widened in genuine shock. He never thought the day would come when the idea of stepping on your own left foot with your right to fly would actually become a reality. The level 1000 effect, on its own, provides immunity to physical attacks. That might sound ordinary since physical attacks are rare in the vastness of the universe. But then he remembered the level 500 effect, immunity to all energy attacks. With the two stacked together, Chen Meng immediately understood the implications. Physical attacks can't pierce it, and energy attacks can't pierce it. That meant almost no one could hurt him anymore. He told himself quite soberly, "I'm invincible." Then he emphasized it again, just to be sure, almost invincible. He remained silent for a long time, letting out a heavy sigh. He hadn't expected a single component to carry two unique, transcendent effects like this. At that moment, only one thought remained in his mind. The original plan had to be scrapped. Now, all trained civilizations in the Naya galaxy must be dismantled and merged, then moved onto the planets inside the train. Everything had to be taken. Nothing could be left behind. Because the original blueprints for the hull armor didn't belong to him, they belonged to the mechanical civilization. That meant this unique, transcendent effect didn't belong to human civilization. It belonged to a mechanical civilization that had perished long ago. The trained civilizations in this sector of the Naya galaxy were almost all influenced by that mechanical civilization. Most of the component blueprints they used were things passed down from them. This meant that if a high-level civilization happened to pass through the Naya galaxy in the future, and happened to pick up the hull armor blueprints left behind by the mechanical civilization, then spent the resources and mo phase stones, they too could possess these two nearly invincible transcendent effects. Chen Meng didn't want any future enemies to have that chance. So, the best way to handle it was to stuff everything into the planet-class train, leaving no gaps behind. At the very least, he didn't want to face someone exactly like himself in terms of defense one day. Of course, he believed that even with immunity to both energy and physics, there were still special methods that could break through. For instance, a divine relic wonder might be able to shatter his absolute defense. But those methods usually came at a great cost, and not every enemy would have them. He knew that relying on this to challenge a god-level civilization was pure fantasy. But he also felt that against a few level 5 civilizations without deep foundations, he could definitely hold his own. The conclusion remained the same. Pack it all up and take it away. Everything. Xiao AI, run the numbers for me. If we take everyone, how many planets will we need? Understood. Very quickly, Xiao AI reached a conclusion. The land usage efficiency on many planets is quite poor. If we ensure 70% of the land is used for residential purposes and maintain a minimum standard for the Human Survival Happiness Index, we'll likely need 1,279 planets. Xiao AI added immediately, which means we need to build 1,279 space portals. Yeah, Chen Meng nodded slightly. He understood what that 70% meant. It meant 70% of the land area on every planet would become residential zones. Living like that, the happiness index definitely wouldn't be high. There would be traffic jams even at midnight. Nature would be compressed, and travel would become a luxury. Fresh water, food, and electricity would all be strained and prone to shortages. But for the planet-class train, those would just be operational puzzles to solve later, not matters of survival. As the train's capacity expanded, a single carriage could hold up to 300 space portals. There were already over 100 in the train. Making another 1,000 would still fit. It was entirely doable. The current space portals were mostly level 500 and very expensive, costing 7 trillion units of iron ore each. But they were level 500 because they had to house planets and act as energy reservoirs for movement and firepower. If it was just to settle residents, they didn't need to be level 500. Level 200 would suffice. A level 200 space portal only cost 13 billion units of iron ore. Making over 1,000 more was barely a drop in the bucket compared to the planet-class train's current stockpile. Chen Meng thought for a moment and then ordered, "Make the arrangements. Prepare to take in all trained civilizations in the Naya galaxy. Bring them all into the planet-class train. Once each civilization is dismantled, merge them into human civilization and settle them on those 1,279 planets. Choose carefully. Prioritize high-quality, habitable planets." Understood. This task was best left to Xiao AI. With the arrangements mostly handled, Chen Meng turned back to the component info on the control screen. A rather wicked thought crossed his mind. He wanted to resurrect Sa Dan just one more time, just to see if the guy could find a way to hurt him without using a divine relic. When you have a hammer, you always want to find a nail, and a sturdy one at that. Sa Dan was the perfect nail. Too bad he was already dead. On the path he had traveled, Sa Dan was the strongest opponent he had ever faced. The man's power didn't rely on a train, but on himself. He was so strong that every movement seemed to tear through space. If they hadn't fought in the Holy Land, but directly in open space, the level of destruction would have been even more terrifying. But in the end, he died too easily. Just one spear, one thrust right through him. 17 hours later, the orders from the planet-class train were handed down. Every civilization prepared themselves fully to be integrated into the planet-class train. No one dared to refuse. In the Naya galaxy, no civilization dared say no to an order from human civilization, especially since they had heard whispers that Lord Meng had recently launched a major campaign. Of course, this wasn't something that could be done overnight. The order was out, But to complete everything properly, it would take a year or two to settle everyone. Even with a super AI like Xiao AI, managing such a massive population was a complex undertaking. Qin thought about the next step. It was time to upgrade the AI to level 1000 to boost its processing power and avoid errors. As for him, he sat alone in the cockpit, hand on the controls, letting the train glide forward as the speed increased notch by notch. When it hit its peak, it smoothly extended and sliced straight into space. The scenery around the train began to warp and then slide away, as if falling into a cosmic rift. It felt like being sucked into a black hole. Soon after, as the surroundings flickered between void and reality, the train slowly decelerated and came to a complete stop. It had successfully set foot in the second universe. The Doppler radar here was still functioning normally. As soon as it started, it ran at full power, scanning and gathering info across a range of 1,000,000 light-years. At the same time, Xiao AI ramped up its operations. On one hand, it quickly analyzed any notable signs within radar range. On the other, it absorbed and analyzed the AI data of those who had recently died in the area. It was teaching itself to better understand the second universe. About half an hour later, Xiao AI finally spoke up in the cockpit. "Captain, I'm afraid I have some disappointing news." "What is it?" Qin looked at the radar screen. The second universe was still a universe, with countless planets showing up on the radar. At a glance, this place looked no different from the first universe. There were stars, it was warm, not freezing, no seas of fire, none of that hellish landscape people usually talked about. If he didn't know this was the second universe, he might have thought he was in some remote corner of the first. Xiao AI's report was very clear. "Based on the data I've gathered, prices here are almost identical to the first universe. It's not like MO stones or iron or are scarce in the first universe, but dirt cheap here. They are just as rare and lacking here. So there's almost no room to make a profit as a middleman." Xiao AI paused for a beat before continuing. "And that's not all. The resources here can't be used in the first universe. All resources here have a hell prefix. For example, hell iron ore, hell MO, hell jade. They can only be used to build hell trains. They're incompatible with components from the first universe." It concluded bluntly. "That means not only can we not run a trade route, but we can't even bring resources back for our own use." Xiao AI added, "In short, even if people from the first universe could come and go as they please, the practical benefit isn't great. Maybe there's only one point. If you're lucky, you might run into dead relatives or friends and have a chat." It confirmed, "This basically matches Sadan's data. People here are practically immortal. Even if they lack things, they only feel hunger. They don't starve to death. If someone desperately craves immortality and is willing to pay the price, then the second universe is indeed the place for them." Qin nodded slightly, saying nothing. His face remained calm as he watched the radar. A very clear thought formed in his mind. It can't be useless. I just haven't seen the angle yet. He spoke up. "There's a city nearby, right? Let's go take a look. See what a city in hell looks like and how the people live here. Let's not jump to conclusions. If it really turns out to be nothing, we'll just call it a sightseeing trip to broaden our horizons." In the second sector, on an anonymous planet, he led his team into a strange city. The strange thing was, even though everyone here was dead, they didn't reek of death. Their bodies weren't rotting, and they didn't look like ghosts. They looked almost no different from normal people. No, they looked exactly the same. That made Qin feel a bit more at ease. He had originally thought they'd need disguises to avoid being outed as the living, but after closer contact, he realized. Everyone here looked alive. There were no visual signs to tell them apart. He told himself, "Well, that saves us some trouble." The streets were packed. It was a modern city with skyscrapers, neon lights, and heavy traffic. Everything made it easy to forget they were in hell, also known as the second sector. Qin led Biao Zi and the others to a roadside stall. The vendor picked up a nameless insect about the size of a palm, rolled it in flour, dropped it into a vat of hot oil until it was crispy, and then sprinkled it with chili powder. It was likely a local snack, except it was hellish in a very mundane way. Qin lip twitched slightly as he watched. He thought, "I can handle insects. But finger-sized ones. Not palm-sized." He pulled Biao Zi and the others away. In recent years, He had used his free time to learn the universal language. Now he could communicate fluently. In the city, all slogans and conversations were in the universal language, so he had no trouble getting around. Occasionally, there were minority languages he didn't understand, but it didn't matter much. By the way, the universal language could be learned instantly through memory implantation, but Chun Meng was sensitive about that. He didn't want to erase any of his memories, nor did he want to shove external ones in. It made him feel tainted, as if he wouldn't be himself anymore. 3 hours later, Chun Meng sat with Biao Zi at a roadside cafe and sighed softly. Fair enough. Looking at it now, the second sector is a complete, independent universe. The only thing is, the resources and special items here all come with the hell prefix. They can't be taken to the first sector, they only circulate here. Chun Meng had originally planned to buy some snacks, but he ended up empty-handed. He had no local currency, nor any hell iron Oregon. He couldn't afford a single cent. Currently, the group was sitting at a free table outside the cafe, not daring to step inside. He didn't have enough money for coffee, and he wasn't in the mood to try some presidential coffee anyway. In other words, this ability to travel freely between the second and first sectors was, for now, only good for sightseeing. He could forget about his dreams of being a black market smuggler. During his few hours of wandering, he had learned more about the second sector. The social hierarchy here was very distinct. Those who knew the universal language while alive and had families in the first sector who regularly burned joss paper for them were considered third class. Those who didn't know the language and struggled to integrate, but still had family burning offerings, were sixth class. And those who didn't know the language and were forgotten after death were ninth class. First class consisted of people who not only knew the language while alive, but also knew about the existence of the second sector. Their families burned incense by the ton, ensuring they lived in luxury here. Aside from that, the second sector wasn't that special. It was just the place where people had a chance of ending up after they died. They could live forever, until they decided they didn't want it anymore. The suicide rate here was extremely high. You don't die of old age, and you're not allowed to kill each other, so suicide becomes the only way out. Just then, Chun Meng suddenly felt his cane vibrate slightly. Inside his coat pocket, his hat and sunglasses vibrated too, as if they were sensing something. He paused, remembering the full names of these 3 items: Hell Cane, Hell Hat, and Hell Sunglasses. They were all items with the Hell prefix, deeply connected to this place. But thinking about it, that wasn't so strange. There were plenty of Hell prefixed items in the first sector, even components like the Hell Cannon. He wasn't the only one who owned them. He stood still, raised his cane, and turned in every direction. Only when he faced due north did the cane stop vibrating. Chun Meng looked up. Across the street was a dark alleyway. He muttered, "Another alley." The cane was being pulled by something, as if it were guiding him. Whether it was a blessing or a curse, he didn't know. He instinctively brushed the badge on his chest. Only one thought was in his head. If you've got the talent, you've got to have the guts. He used his cane to cross the busy street to the other side, which took exactly 6 minutes. The street wasn't wide, only about 8 lanes, but there were no traffic lights. Cars flew by like bullets. Crossing the road was a genuine challenge. He went deep into the alley until it split in two. The cane vibrated again. When he turned east, it immediately went silent. Following that guidance, Chun Meng wove through the winding alleys of the strange city, eventually reaching a place that looked like a floodgate. It was a public utility, a sort of underground tunnel to drain water during major floods. But there hadn't been a flood in a long time, so the place had turned into a slum. The entrance was crowded with people in rags, their bodies covered in wounds. Some had even pulled out their own intestines and hung them on the railings, then used them to hang themselves. During the day, they swayed like dolls in the sun. It was a chaotic dance of demons, not a single normal person in sight. Only here did Chun Meng finally feel the true atmosphere of hell. He thought to himself, feeling a bit annoyed, if hell didn't look like this, what would be the point? Then he glanced back at the main road, where office workers were still carrying briefcases. A blunt thought struck him. You're dead and you still have to go to work, forever. No wonder the suicide rate is so high. At that moment, quite a few people were looking at Chun Meng's group with strange, fearful eyes. Their group stood out too much. Their clothes were clean and neat. They looked like they belonged in the upper world. More importantly, They all had their limbs intact, which was completely out of place here. No one dared to look for long, fearing they might accidentally provoke a powerful figure. Chen Meng looked down at his cane. It was still pointing the way, urging him deeper into the slum. The air smelled horrific, a foul mixture of mold, sweat, sour alcohol, and cheap perfume. People still had to work here, but they had nowhere to bathe. Their only option was to douse themselves in perfume to mask the stench. With hundreds of scents clashing, the air quality was a literal health hazard. If you weren't standing right there, it would be hard to believe such a prosperous city could hide a place like this in the shadows of its skyscrapers. Let's go in. We're already here. Chen Meng wanted to know exactly what was leading him. He led Biao Zi and the others quickly into the floodgate. The light changed abruptly. As his eyes adjusted to the dim glow, a space resembling a parking garage appeared ahead. The ground was covered in blankets and mattresses, with families huddled together everywhere. Most were human, but there were several other jumbled races he didn't recognize. But overall, they had a basic human structure, just with certain parts elongated or deformed. Following the Cane's guidance, he went deeper. No one dared to cause trouble or drive him away. This confirmed his suspicion. This place might be filthy, but the people knew how to read a room. Finally, the Cane led him to the deepest part of the slum. The environment here was slightly cleaner. Several merchants sat on the ground, displaying their wares on white cloths. One look, and it was clear, a black market. He noticed that the four corners of each white cloth had strings attached. It was a clever design. If trouble came, they'd pull the strings, the cloth would instantly bundle up, and they'd grab their gear and run. Chen Meng had seen markets like this before, but that was in the world before he transmigrated. It had been so long that the memory was fading. This detail confirmed his guess. It was definitely a black market. Only illegal traders would prepare like that. However, the items on display were unbelievably cheap. Chen Meng squatted in front of a stall, looking at the junk on the cloth, a cracked wash basin, a used bar of soap, a nearly empty tube of toothpaste, a few half-burnt cigarette butts. Calling it junk was an understatement. These things belonged in a trash heap, not a black market. But since they were being sold here, there had to be something strange about them. He just couldn't see it yet. He picked up the nearly empty toothpaste tube and examined it closely. Nothing special. He'd never even heard of the brand. The printing on the tube was so faded it was almost gone. How much? Chen Meng looked up and asked. As soon as he looked up, he saw the vendor standing frozen, face pale, eyes glued to the tube in his hand. His voice trembled. Sir, did you just pick that up with your bare hands? Chen Meng went silent for a beat, then said calmly, I'm wearing invisible gloves. I knew it. The vendor sighed in relief. He then carefully wrapped his hand in his sleeve, took back the tube, and introduced it. This tube costs 170,000 units of hell iron ore. He pulled a device from his coat and tapped it against the tube. The screen displayed a number, Life Force 17. He immediately said, his voice both pleading and urgent, Life Force of 17, selling for 170,000 units of hell iron ore. This is a bargain. Just then, Xiao AI finished scanning the local AI data, gathered the relevant info, and transmitted it directly to Chen Meng. Chen Meng, the items here are called Hell Forbidden items. They're similar to Cosmic Forbidden items. Xiao AI explained. In the first sector, Cosmic Forbidden items are objects that once traveled back in time through space-time rifts, causing interference. When their past and present states overlap, incredible things happen. That's a specialty of the first sector. Hell doesn't have those kinds of time rifts. Xiao AI moved to the main point. The second sector has no space-time rifts at all. Hell Forbidden items are a specialty of this universe, operating on a different mechanism. After a person dies, some of their personal belongings or items they were in contact with for a long time have an extremely low chance of following their owner to the second sector. Those items are the Hell Forbidden items. It explained the index. Each Hell Forbidden item has a different life force value. This value mainly depends on how long the item drifted between the two universes. The longer it drifted, the higher the life force. Xiao AI continued. It's clear that people from the first sector don't necessarily appear in the second sector immediately after death. There's a drifting phase that is completely random. It could be just a second, or it could be 10,000 years, a million years, or even tens of millions of years. It laid out the rule: 1 year of drifting equals 1 point of life force. Anything under a year is 0, making it practically useless. And the effects? Hell-forbidden items have 2 main uses. The most common is absorbing the life force to enhance one's physical constitution. The rarer one. Word is that the first and second sectors are separated by a vast void. If you want to return to the first sector, you need to collect enough hell-forbidden items to swim against the current. Chen Mang's eyes darkened slightly as he heard this. He told himself firmly, this is the useful stuff. However, this hasn't been verified. According to my data, no one has ever done it, and it's unclear where the rumor started. Xiao AI added immediately. One more thing, you can't touch hell-forbidden items with bare skin. If you do, it causes a long-lasting, stinging pain, like rubbing stinging nettles directly on your ass and then trying to massage it in. Normal people can't stand it. You have to use something to insulate it, even plastic wrap or toilet paper. Chen Mang processed this in his head, his expression unchanging. He understood why he could hold the toothpaste tube without an issue. It was likely because he wasn't a being of this universe. In essence, that item came from the first sector, and since he was also from the first sector, touching it was no problem. Looking closely, he realized that while people from the first and second sectors looked the same, the small details were very different. Absorbing life force to enhance physical constitution. To be honest, Chen Mang was a bit tempted. He didn't plan to use this as his primary means of combat, but any increase in strength was a win. He also wanted to buy some to test if he could even absorb it. The only problem was, he had no money. He looked up at the vendor. The man's face was sincere, his eyes full of expectation, as if he were just waiting for a nod to close the deal. Chen Mang paused for a beat, and then said, no rush. Take a look at this item of mine. Do you buy? After speaking, he rummaged through his coat for a moment and pulled out a lighter. The vendor put on gloves and took the lighter very carefully, then brought his device close. Let me see the life force on your item. If it's too high, I won't be able to afford it. The next second, a string of numbers appeared on the screen, 0.0000317. The vendor handed it back, hesitating. This is basically 0. It's worthless. He looked at the group following Chen Mang. Their clothes were clean, their aura strong. He thought he'd met some big shots and was prepared to have his mind blown. He didn't expect the man to pull out a piece of junk. Chen Mang nodded slightly and stood up to walk away. Wait for me here a moment. Immediately after, he went to a secluded corner and stepped into the fridge. He had an idea and wanted to test it right away. His lighter had life force, which meant it was considered a cosmic forbidden item. So, that meant his journey from the first sector to the second sector was counted as drifting time, but because he traveled so fast, the number was nearly 0. So, could he manually manufacture forbidden items with extremely high life force? Chen Mang returned to the planet-class train, back to the Naya galaxy in the first sector. He controlled the train to jump back 10,000 years in time, then immediately traveled back to the second sector. Then he stepped out of the fridge and back into the black market. Here, Chen Mang returned to the vendor and pulled out another lighter. My mistake, I grabbed the wrong one earlier. Measure this one. The vendor took the lighter and brought the device close. The next second, it beeped loudly. The screen didn't show a number. Instead, 3 exclamation marks popped up. He stood there dazed, then looked up, his eyes wide. Big brother, my machine only goes up to 1,000 life force. Yours is off the charts. It's too much. My shop is small. I can't afford to buy this. Chen Mang didn't answer. He just slowly stood up, leaning on his cane, looking at the lighter in the vendor's hand. Thoughts raced through his mind, becoming clearer by the second. He had only meant to test it. He didn't expect it to actually work. If he went back to the Naya galaxy 10,000 years ago and then came to the second sector, wouldn't everything he carried be equivalent to drifting for 10,000 years? A hell-forbidden item with 10,000 life force. It was that easy to make. He could even mass-produce them. He realized he could become the richest person in the second sector. It was too easy. Or to put it bluntly, if he was willing to trade his train, he could build the strongest hell train here just by accumulating enough hell-forbidden items. The trade-off was that he'd never be able to return to the first sector. He could only keep one train and live here forever. Or he could use a massive amount of hell iron or to hoard hell mo Fei and jade. then forcibly construct an incredibly powerful ship right here in the second sector. It felt like opening a door to infinite resources. There were many other uses too. For example, these forbidden items could significantly boost his physical stats. He just hadn't tried it yet. He wasn't sure if he could even absorb them. He set that aside for now. Currently, Chen Meng glanced at a special item on the vendor's stall with a control panel named Hellfire Stone. This wasn't a hell forbidden item. This vendor clearly sold more than just contraband. And Chen Meng's cane had led him here precisely because it sensed this Hellfire Stone. How much for this? Chen Meng asked. The vendor hesitated for a moment before replying, 300,000 units of hell iron ore. For a special item, that price was practically a giveaway. It was suspicious, but the problem was that this special item was almost useless. It was just like a match. A light rub produced a small flame, like a lighter that never ran out. Because of that, it had been sitting unsold for a long time. Chen Meng understood that the price being inflated was normal. It was a special item, after all, but useless was still useless. Chen Meng paused for a beat, then looked up at the man. Do you sell here often? The man nodded immediately. Every day? Chen Meng said bluntly, I didn't bring any money out today. I'll take this first and come back tomorrow to pay you. Is that okay? Okay. The man nodded vigorously, barely needing to think. He picked up the Hellfire Stone and handed it to Chen Meng, a wide grin on his face. You don't look like the type to skip out on a debt. I trust you. If you need anything else, just say the word. I don't have much stock, but I've been in this business a long time. I have connections. I can source things for you. The transaction was quick and smooth. Chen Meng left with the Hellfire Stone without spending a dime. On the way, he twirled the item in his hand as he headed toward the city's largest auction house. He planned to sell the Hell Forbidden item with 10,000 years of life force. The Hellfire Stone looked like a rough pebble with a coarse surface. Rubbing it with his thumb made a flame flare up. It was weak, just enough to light a cigarette. Another item with the Hell prefix. It seemed the second sector still had plenty of good stuff. Resources couldn't be taken out, but special items could be brought out of the second sector. If he could hoard a bunch of them here, it would be a way to boost human civilization's power. He reminded himself, as long as it's something I can take outside, it's a win. 10 minutes later, Chen Meng walked out of the auction house. He thought they'd be shocked, seeing a hell forbidden item with 10,000 years of life force and not knowing how to price it. But the receptionist acted like they'd seen it all before. The manager was cold and professional, showing almost no emotion, and quickly gave a price. 80 million units of hell iron ore. If he put it up for a normal auction, given its rarity, it could have gone for up to 120 million. But Chen Meng didn't have time to wait for the next big auction, so he chose to sell it directly to the house. A lower price was the cost of speed. He let out a sigh. What a shame. If only hell iron ore from the second sector could be brought to the first sector and used normally. If that were possible, he could really just step on his own feet and fly. Is there a way to bring hell iron ore from the second sector to the first and use it? The thought flashed by, but Chen Meng suppressed it. For now, he'd keep it a secret. No need to be hasty or let anyone catch his scent. At the same time, in some corner of the second sector, an old man sat cross-legged on the ground of a planet. He seemed to sense something and slowly opened his eyes. No one knew how long he'd been sitting there. Dried grass had grown all around him, and the air was so silent you could hear the wind. A long time later, he muttered in a faint voice, "The hell set. Someone has gathered 4 pieces again. I wonder if anyone will ever truly complete the set." Behind him, the crisp, bell-like laughter of a woman rang out. The hell set has 7 special items. 3 are in the first sector, 3 are in the second sector. The last one's whereabouts are unknown, she said all at once, her voice like she was telling an old story. People in the second sector can almost never go to the first sector. Only those in the first sector have a chance to come to the second. The only way for the hell set to be completed is to wait for the 3 items in the first sector to happen to turn into hell forbidden items and drift over to the second sector. Only then is there a possibility of gathering the whole set. But even if that's done, there's still the final piece. No one knows what it is or where it is. It's not even clear if it's in the first or second sector. She lowered her voice, sounding a bit bored. It's been so many years, and no one's ever finished it. Why do you care? Countless lucky people have found 4 pieces, but what's the point? Without the full set, they're practically useless. 6 pieces or 1 piece, there's not much difference. The old man didn't speak. In truth, even he wasn't sure what would happen if the hell set was completed. He only remembered that from a long time ago, everyone believed that completing the set would grant a massive reward. A long time later, he said softly, "Let's not speak of it." He looked up. "How long have I been asleep this time?" The woman replied, "Probably over 3,000 years. I didn't keep exact count." "That's a long sleep," he said slowly, as if still in a dream. "Has anything major happened in these 3,000 years?" "No," she answered briefly. Then she remembered. "There's one thing. The demon clan has fled en masse to the first sector. It's unclear how they did it." The old man froze. An entire race fled? He was silent for a long time. Then his voice grew raspy. "I see. Go investigate. The second universe isn't entirely impossible to leave for the first. After fulfilling some extremely strict conditions, there is a chance to return. But an entire race escaping to the first universe like that, it was truly unheard of." To him, it was just a curiosity. It didn't make him want to take his civilization back. Not everyone wanted to return to the first universe. Escaping from the second universe only to die there meant true death, being wiped from existence. He preferred the present. Immortality, eternal life. This life offered infinite possibilities. You could sleep as long as you wanted without worrying about your civilization being destroyed or fearing a sudden death. Living like this was much more comfortable than being in the second universe. At this moment, Chun Meng was sitting in his planet-class train, looking at the lighter in his hand and letting out a long sigh. He had just sold a lighter with 10,000 years of life force to the auction house in exchange for 80 million units of hell iron ore. He had obtained this lighter not long ago through a time reversal trick, basically exploiting a glitch. Of course, when he did the experiment, he didn't just bring a lighter. He had stuffed quite a few trinkets on his person, and they all simultaneously turned into hell-forbidden items with a uniform 10,000 years of life force. Once the experiment was done, he realized one thing. He couldn't absorb the life force from the hell-forbidden items. This meant the greatest use of these items, draining life force to strengthen the body, was useless to him. He felt a pang of regret. His chance to blow up a planet with a single punch was gone. He tossed the lighter aside and leaned back, silent for a few seconds. Just then, the cane in his hand began to vibrate again. The amplitude wasn't large this time, but the cane emitted a faint white light. The light was picked up by the Doppler radar, and then countless white dots appeared on the screen. Not just a few hundred, but hundreds of thousands of dots. They were all the same type of item, hell outfits. The radar showed them within a range of 1,000,000 square light-years, even marking their specific locations. Chen Meng watched the scene, thinking deeply. Ever since the cane led him to the Hellfire Stone, he had a vague feeling that these hell-prefixed items could be combined into something. But he had always thought it was unrealistic because special items weren't unique. They weren't common, but many people own them. If it were a set, it shouldn't be that widespread. Previously, he only had 3 pieces, and the cane only vibrated to show direction. It didn't vibrate in the first universe because the first universe didn't have Hellfire Stones. He had looted plenty of items from the Casa civilization, but he truly hadn't seen that one. It seemed this item was only produced in the second universe. Now that he had 4 pieces, the guidance was much clearer. The radar showed everything directly. It was much more intuitive. He concluded, "Let's just go see. No point in guessing." Chen Meng didn't hesitate. He jumped off the train, went through the fridge back to the city, and headed straight for the nearest white dot. It was still the slum at the floodgate, but a different merchant. He squatted down and looked at the outfit placed on the white cloth. He thought it would be a normal outfit, like a coat or something. He didn't expect it to be a combo of a white t-shirt and beach shorts. It looked like all it needed was sunglasses and flip-flops to be a Hawaii vacation outfit. It felt like he was going on a holiday. He looked up. "How much?" The merchant replied quickly, 30 million units of hell iron Oregon. Then he hurriedly explained, "This is very rare, and besides." Chen Meng didn't bother listening. He tossed a spatial bag containing exactly 30 million units of hell iron ore. He wasn't short on this stuff now. At least to him, that ore was practically meaningless. He gave a cold smirk. "Rare? There are 100,000 sets within a million light years. It's not common, but calling it extremely rare is a stretch. Back on the train, Chun Mang laid the outfit out in front of him to check its effects. This was a special set item. Effect: wearing it bypasses all radar detection, regardless of level. He froze. When he was haggling earlier, he hadn't even checked the effect or expected much. He just wanted to complete the set. But this was powerful. Bypassing all levels meant that if someone wore it, even his Doppler radar wouldn't detect them. The only way to see them was with the naked eye, and by the time you saw them, they'd be standing right in front of you. Something like this selling for only 30 million was a steal. He immediately guessed why. The black market dealers weren't stupid. They sold it like this because while it sounded broken, it didn't provide a decisive advantage for someone whose personal strength wasn't high enough. For example, even if he bypassed an enemy's radar and snuck up on their train, he couldn't do anything but watch. But if this fell into the hands of Sa Dan or those god-level beings, people who condensed massive power into themselves, it would be like giving a tiger wings. Chun Mang chuckled softly. Pretty strong. He looked at the hundreds of thousands of white dots on the Doppler radar and realized his plan to corner the market still had legs. If he produced infinite hell-forbidden items, he'd amass a massive amount of hell iron ore. With the ore, he could then buy up a huge number of hell outfits. Later, when he returned to the first universe, he just needed to find a high-level civilization to offload it all. The overall chain was fine. A few details still needed weighing, but there was no harm in hoarding the goods. He reminded himself, just hoard it first. If it's wrong, figure it out later. But right at that moment, the scepter released a blinding white light. This time, the guidance was even clearer. Exactly 1,090 white glowing dots appeared on the Doppler radar. Each dot corresponded to a special item, the Hell Slippers. Chun Mang frowned. Is this really a vacation outfit set? But that wasn't all. Right inside the cabin, a small wormhole naturally opened up, as if torn from the void, leading straight to the nearest white dot. A one-way, single-use wormhole. The other end was on a planet 120,000 light-years away. Everything was becoming way too convenient. Without another word, he pulled Xiao AI straight into the wormhole, stepping onto another planet in an instant. The Hell Slippers were sitting in an auction house. The auction was scheduled for the 17th, but Chun Mang was too lazy to wait. He found the manager and offered to buy them at a premium price. At first, they refused, as the market price was around 3 million. But when he bumped it up to 30 million, they agreed immediately. No matter where you go, money is always a tier 0 superpower. The slipper's effects, lighter footsteps, increased movement speed, and the ability to walk freely on water. Pretty standard. It might be useful at a planetary level, but at his current civilization tier, if he faced real danger, these slippers were practically useless. But he didn't buy them for their effects. He bought them to complete the set. By now, Chun Mang had his hands on 6 special items with the Hell prefix, the Hell Scepter, the Hell Hat, the Hell Sunglasses, the Hell Flint, the Hell Outfit, and the Hell Slippers. He returned to the planet ship's cabin, put everything on, and stood in front of the mirror. A white t-shirt and floral shorts. Slippers on his feet, leaning on a cane, a hat on his head, sunglasses over his eyes, and playing with a flint. Looking closely, he really looked like a guy on a beach vacation. He found it hilarious. Anyone seeing him would think he got separated from his tour group. Right then, a notification panel popped up on the ship's screen, the text scrolling slowly. You have collected 6 pieces of the Hell equipment. The Hell equipment consists of 7 pieces in total. Once all 7 pieces are collected, the Hell equipment will be unlocked. The Hell equipment is the only equipment set in the first and second universes. There is no other equipment set. The Hell Scepter, Hell Hat, and Hell Sunglasses are exclusively produced in the first universe. The Hell Flint, Hell Outfit, and Hell Slippers are exclusively produced in the second universe. The final special item is named the Hell Bracelet. Once a person possesses the complete Hell equipment, no one else can acquire it. Chun Mang narrowed his eyes. He guessed right. It really was a set. Not only was this set unique, but the very concept of an equipment set was unique. Currently, no other set was recognized by the laws of the universe. But the notification didn't state the effects after unlocking, nor did it provide any further guidance. No location, no origin, No hints. It just threw him a name, the Hell Bracelet. He memorized the name, then turned and asked, Xiao AI, is there anything in your database about the Hell Bracelet? Xiao AI was different now. She no longer had an empty database. After absorbing massive amounts of data from various AIs, Xiao AI was practically an encyclopedia. But the answer came swiftly. No, Captain. My database contains no information regarding the Hell Bracelet. Chen Meng gave a slight nod. He understood that the final piece must be incredibly difficult to find, possibly even one of a kind. No need to rush headlong into searching for it. This kind of thing depended on fate. If fate allowed, he'd find it. If not, the universe was so vast that he might search his whole life and still come up empty. He made a decision, put it on hold for now, and get back to mining ore. Afterward, Chen Meng made another trip back to the Naya star system. He used space-time recall to go back 100,000 years and hired a group of workers from the Shuelon planet. Each person was strapped with lighters, instantly producing a massive amount of hell contraband. His vitality skyrocketed to 100,000. Over the next month, Chen Meng used wormholes to jump across several civilizations within a 100,000 light-year radius, running across multiple planets to sell off the pile of hell contraband. He exchanged them for a massive amount of hell ore, then used that ore to buy up a huge stock of special items, most notably, the hell outfit. For that item alone, he bought over 10,000 sets. A month later, Chen Meng dusted off his hands and left cleanly, returning to the first universe's Naya star system, ready to embark on a new journey. Leaving behind a bunch of dumbfounded auction house bosses, staring blankly at the high-vitality lighters that had suddenly flooded the market. They began to wonder if some guy out there had died but still brought a lighter production line with him, drifted for 100,000 years, and accidentally started mass production. The market was temporarily thrown into a bit of chaos. Normally, the price of this item wasn't inflated for no reason. It had real value, so the market wouldn't fluctuate too violently. But its price also relied heavily on scarcity, and Chen Meng had dumped it like a flash flood. Yet the fact that it only caused a minor disruption without crashing the price completely spoke volumes about how solid the item's inherent value was. He didn't care. The second universe wasn't his main battlefield. He was just a passerby, at least for now. He'd worry about it after he died. And right now, he wasn't dead yet. It was fine. Back in the first universe's Naya star system, Chen Meng looked at the control panel and felt a sense of relief. He used to constantly wonder how long he could survive. Now, he didn't have to think about it anymore. If he died later and went to the second universe, with his methods, he wouldn't dare say he'd build a massive empire, but he definitely wouldn't end up miserable. At this moment, the ship was still loaded with tens of millions of units of hell ore. It was unusable, just pure rock. He didn't plan on using it anyway. He just wanted to bring it back as a display piece. Before leaving the second universe, he had hidden the leftover ore on a dead star, buried it deep underground, and set up a shield. It would be extremely hard to detect. If he really died in the future, he'd find his way there to retrieve the ore, treating it as capital to rise again. He just hoped that when he died and was randomly teleported to hell, the coordinates wouldn't be too far from where he buried his resources. He reminded himself, mark the coordinates. Memorize them. Don't forget. With everything done, Chen Meng stretched, took a quick shower, and lay down to sleep. It had been a long time since he had a proper sleep. His body was truly exhausted. He slept incredibly well. When he woke up, he felt completely recovered. He sat in front of the control panel and began taking inventory of the loot from destroying the ultimate evil civilization. First up, the resources. The ore in the ship's storage currently amounted to 4,137 trillion units. Initially, there was even more, but he had dumped 3,750 trillion units into upgrading his armor to level 1,000. It was a hefty expense. Right after, a notification panel popped up on the control board. Human civilization has met the upgrade conditions and will automatically upgrade. The range of this upgrade shockwave is 100 million light-years. All life forms in Tier 1 civilizations and above will receive this upgrade shockwave in their own respective ways. The transmission speed of the upgrade shockwave is the speed of light. Tier 4 human civilization has successfully upgraded to Tier 5. Chen Meng looked at the notification and chuckled softly. He leaned back in his chair, took out the health flint, and lit a cigarette. Easy to use, just a bit hot on the hands. The civilization had upgraded again. The condition to reach Tier 4 was for the maximum attack energy to exceed 100,000, which was the power of a full-force strike from a level 1007 color firepower module. That condition was met when he faced Satan. Human civilization, in a short span of less than 10 years, had leaped from Tier 1 to Tier 5. This was exactly what high-level civilizations called a civilization explosion. Encountering some fortuitous encounter or specific factor, a civilization's power would swell in an extremely short time, its tiers skyrocketing. For this kind of anomaly, the surrounding high-level civilizations would usually want to nip it in the bud. Unfortunately for them, the high-level civilizations around him were either too slow to react or too weak. No one could suppress him. He continued looking at the new civilization status board. Civilization name: Human Civilization. Civilization Tier 5. Civilization Leader: Chen Meng. Civilization Planets: Shuilon Planet, Xuanwu Planet, Mining Planet 1, Mining Planet 2, Mining Planet 3, Mining Planet 4, etc. Civilization Population: 58 trillion. Upgrade Conditions: Maximum attack energy exceeding 200,000, and possession of one civilization wonder. P.S. From Tier 2 onward, every upgrade will emit an upgrade shockwave that all surrounding civilizations can detect. The higher the tier, the wider the range. Civilization Ability: Resource consumption for upgrading all ship modules within the civilization is reduced by half. Manhwa stone consumption remains unchanged. Excludes defensive modules such as armor, energy shields, etc. Chen Meng looked at the Tier 5 civilization ability with a strange expression. It wasn't like space-time recall, which could unleash a devastating blow under specific conditions, but it was incredibly useful for rapidly boosting the overall strength of the entire civilization. He concluded, this is what you need to sustain a long-term war. If his civilization had tens of thousands of warships, this civilization ability would be truly overpowered. But the problem was, in his current civilization, the only ship that could actually fight was his own. After absorbing a bunch of civilizations into human civilization, the population had jumped to 58 trillion. Their fleets defaulted to his ownership as well, but they were too weak. For now, they couldn't even be called warships. Even so, Chen Meng felt this ability suited him perfectly. His modules were already high tier, and every upgrade burned a massive amount of resources. Cutting the consumption in half meant cutting the pain in half. He told himself, nurturing one supreme ship is the same as nurturing an entire civilization. It's just a rather unconventional approach. The Nanmei civilization, the one Fatty was in, was also a Tier 5 civilization. As far as he knew, its territory spanned nearly 10 million light-years, its strength was formidable, and it possessed 3 civilization wonders. Civilization upgrades were automatic. Once the conditions were met, it jumped a tier. It was unavoidable. That meant the Nanmei civilization didn't even have a single ship with a level 2007 color firepower module. As for that condition, to Chen Meng, it actually wasn't that hard. If he wanted to, he could do it right now. The only price was that the pile of resources he had just hoarded would be wiped clean again. He muttered, his tone almost mocking himself. Weird. Why do I feel like this Nanmei civilization? Sounds fierce, but isn't actually that fierce. Xiao AI spoke up inside the cabin. Captain, I need to remind you of one thing. Your planetary cabin provided 99.99% of the energy consumption when you fired the main cannon. Other civilizations do not have this super effect. Even if they could upgrade it, they wouldn't be able to use it. Furthermore, the level 200, 500, and 1000 marks are all thresholds. Every time a threshold is crossed, the required amount of manhwa stones increases exponentially. For them, it's almost impossible to pull off. Chen Meng laughed. I know that. I was just joking. The super effect of the A-class energy beam main cannon after reaching level 500 was, the closer to a planet, the lower the energy consumption. And the level 500 super effect of the spatial gate was, able to store an entire planet inside the ship. Stacking the two together was what birthed such a perverted effect. But these two effects weren't unique. Other civilizations still had a chance to obtain them. It's just that randomly drawing both of them at the same time, and then upgrading both to level 500, required quite a bit of luck. That luck didn't belong to Chun Mang. It belonged to the mechanical civilization. Both effects came from the primitive module blueprints crafted by the mechanical civilization. Thinking of this, he fell slightly silent. The mechanical civilization truly seemed blessed by the heavens. If they hadn't been crushed by the Zerg, they might have actually had a chance to become the second tier 4 civilization to step out of the Naya star system, perhaps even reaching tier 5. Unfortunately, luck doesn't favor one civilization forever. Chun Mang quite liked this tier 5 civilization ability. The only thing he didn't understand was why it had a grudge against defensive modules, since the effect didn't apply to things like armor or energy shields. And from the very beginning, defensive modules had always been the biggest material sinks. He clicked his tongue. Cutting the cost in half for firepower, but not for armor, feels like it's deliberately forcing me to keep burning money just to survive. He shifted his gaze to the Haomiao civilization on the Doppler radar. The second stop for expanding human civilization's map was right there. Currently, both he and Nanmei were tier 5. But while Nanmei had a territory of nearly 10 million light-years, he was only hugging a tiny corner known as the Naya star system. No matter how you looked at it, it was lopsided. He finalized his plan. First, swallow the resources of the Haomiao civilization. After that, I'll figure out how to attack the tier 5 mediocre civilization, the one currently occupying the former position of the Naya civilization. Once he devoured that tier 5, his map could expand to a range of millions of square light-years. War was always the main theme between civilizations. Plundering was always the fastest way to gather resources. New target, Haomiao civilization. The Haomiao civilization had a diameter of 170,000 light-years. Its resources were definitely far greater than the ultimate evil civilizations. It wasn't like ultimate evil either, because Haomiao was a true tier 4 civilization. Backed against the cosmic rift, they could unleash an explosive strike by going back to the distant past. For example, going back tens of millions of years, aiming at the Naya star system, and firing an A-class energy beam main cannon. Letting that shot travel through the rift for tens of millions of years, accumulating into a firepower level of several thousand, and then delivering a devastating blow. Even if they and the Naya star system were on the same side of the rift, that move could still be used. They just needed to advance a few hundred light-years deep into the Naya star system, find the right angle, and fire diagonally forward. The only problem was the distance. The Haomiao civilization was only 870,000 light-years away from him. Too close. That meant they could, at most, go back 870,000 years to fire at him. Such a short accumulation period wasn't enough for the cannon to become overwhelmingly powerful. Even reaching the level 1000 mark would be difficult. The energy beam cannon that the Nanmei civilization fired from the opposite side of the rift, crossing the entire rift, only reached level 4798. Chun Mang looked at that number, weighing it in his mind. Being close means less fear of accumulation, but it also means they can react faster. I can't be careless. The only real concern was if the enemy chose to bombard his past timeline. For instance, if an energy beam cannon fired from the cosmic rift took 3 years to arrive, its power wouldn't be massive, but if their luck was filthy enough, and the shot perfectly pierced through a series of planets, hitting the exact planet he was standing on, that would be a massive headache. He didn't want to fight a battle where he constantly had to look over his shoulder at the past. It was too restrictive. He needed a way to shield his past so he wouldn't have to be on guard all the time. Therefore, this battle had to be incredibly fast. So fast that before they could even react, he would have already smashed their political mother planet to pieces. He told himself, strike fast, end it fast. No messing around. The plan was simple. Chun Mang didn't linger, nor did he rest. The planet ship was in its peak state. It had resources, it had a planet inside, and it was fully capable of taking on several large-scale wars back-to-back. He opened a wormhole straight away, crossing 870,000 light-years and plunging right into the core of the Haomiao civilization, consuming 1.1 trillion units of iron ore. The wormhole opened. The planet ship, like a giant python, slowly slithered out of the wormhole's mouth, and he was now standing right in the central region of Haomiao. At this point, his tier was an absolute crush. With level 1000 armor, even if he stood completely still, Haomiao would be hard-pressed to crack his defenses. When the disparity reached this level, there was no need for schemes. Just start the war and be done with it. He didn't even bother hiding his tracks, intentionally opening the wormhole right next to their political mother planet. He knew that was where their firepower was strongest. Doing so was extremely dangerous. If it were him, seeing a strange wormhole appear near his ship, he wouldn't ask a single question. He'd fire first and ask later. God knows what would crawl out of it. Chen Meng had mentally prepared himself to face a rain of artillery fire. But what greeted him instead was a storm of forced messages on the ship's broadcast radio. Leader of human civilization, greetings. This is the Haomiao civilization. We choose to surrender. Please do not open fire. Please do not open fire. We surrender. Repeat, we surrender. Surrender? Chen Meng looked at the barrage of messages, his expression a bit strange. Not only were there forced private messages, but he also received numerous civilization broadcasts in the vicinity, all of them surrender notices sent out by Haomiao. He glanced at the timestamp. The other side had broadcasted this even before he opened the wormhole to come here. Calculating the time, they broadcasted it right after he destroyed Satan. An unbelievable thought popped into his head. It can't be that exaggerated, right? Haomiao was a genuine tier 4 civilization. At that time, he was also only tier 4, not yet tier 5. Yet they knelt before even fighting? Their territory was twice as large as the ultimate evil civilizations. Their strength should logically be superior to ultimate evils as well. He knew very well that civilization broadcasts weren't for rapid communication, but to leave a record in the universe. The moment he stepped into the center of Haomiao, he received the surrender broadcast they had sent out dozens of days ago, shortly after he had taken down ultimate evil. This was also a sort of loophole. If he hadn't come to Haomiao, that broadcast would have taken nearly 1,000,000 years to reach the Naya star system. He would have never heard it. But because he came, he not only heard it, but also knew it was sent a long time ago. The sincerity was overflowing, but sincerity could also be bait. Chen Meng narrowed his eyes at the Doppler radar screen. He thought this was a stalling tactic or some other trick. If judging purely by civilization strength, Haomiao was stronger than ultimate evil, unless factoring in the variable that was Satan. Satan in his future state had strength touching the threshold of a tier 5 civilization, something a normal tier 4 civilization would find hard to fend off. Thinking about it that way, their fear made sense. But it was still too smooth. He reminded himself, the smoother it is, the more cautious I need to be. Right after, an extremely primitive spacecraft flew up from Haomiao's political mother planet, slowly approaching the planet ship. Then, it fired a few projectiles deep into space. The projectiles exploded into fireworks, forming massive words. Welcome, human civilization, for your visit. Visit? Yeah, in a sense. Then the broadcast channel popped another message. Please do not open fire. Please do not open fire. The Haomiao civilization surrenders. Total surrender. Please follow the spacecraft and land on the planet. The leaders of Haomiao have prepared a banquet to entertain our esteemed guest. The spacecraft turned around and flew toward the planet, constantly looking back and signaling for him to follow. Chen Meng sat inside the planet ship, with absolutely no intention of following. He wasn't sure if they were truly surrendering, or if they had set up a decapitation trap right on the planet, waiting for him to walk right into it. He was confident enough in his level 1000 armor. Haomiao had little chance of doing anything to this ship, but his caution wouldn't allow him to go attend a banquet. He replied over the broadcast, his voice cold and concise. Planet ship. In 3 minutes. I want to see your leaders appear in front of me. The initiative was in Chen Meng's hands. Naturally, he didn't want to follow their arrangements. The other side stopped replying. The guiding spacecraft didn't wait either, returning to its planet on its own. 3 minutes passed. Chen Meng didn't see the Haomiao leaders appear, but he received another private message. Please do not open fire. Please do not open fire. The Haomiao civilization will surrender completely. Our rule is, the king does not leave the sky. Leaders cannot enter space. We beg for our esteemed guests' forgiveness. Our king has prepared fine wine and a banquet, just waiting for our esteemed guest to land so we can negotiate all matters. Chen glanced at the Doppler radar one more time. The radar reported no direct threats, and it did indeed detect a banquet already laid out. But if he was 30% suspicious before, he was 70% suspicious now. What kind of rule was kept intact even when standing on the brink of annihilation? That excuse sounded even less convincing than them setting up a decapitation trap on the planet, waiting for him to walk in. He didn't reply anymore. On the roof of the planet ship, the A-class energy beam main cannon began charging up, the patterns on its barrel flashing. Then, the moment Chen Mang pressed the red button on the control panel, a blazing pillar of light shot out of the barrel like divine punishment, hurtling straight toward Hao Miao's political mother planet. The universe was dead silent. A few seconds later, the pale blue planet in deep space suddenly exploded. Debris shot out like a meteor shower. One shot, and the planet was shattered. Chen Mang's patience had run out. He said a very concise sentence in his mind. Don't let them drag me down to the ground. The next moment, the planet ship suddenly lost control, hurtling straight toward the center of the explosion. No, it was a gravitational pull. The center of the explosion had become bizarre. Countless rays of light were being pulled back, unable to escape. Space was visibly warping. A black hole. A newly born black hole. The black hole itself was invisible, but it could be seen through its effect on the surrounding matter, a blinding halo of light on the outside, and a deep, pitch-black void at the center. Right now, the planet ship was being dragged straight toward that maw. No one knew what would happen if they fell deep into a black hole, but it definitely wouldn't be anything good. Chen Mang didn't speak. He gripped tightly, pushing the control stick to the absolute maximum. The planet inside the planetary cabin began burning rapidly. The thrusters at the rear of the ship spewed out streams of purple-blue hot gas, propelling the ship with extreme thrust. The planet ship's maximum speed was 98.77 million kilometers per hour, roughly 1/10 the speed of light. At that level, he could normally escape the gravitational pull of almost any celestial body. But against this newborn black hole, that speed was still too slow. The ship was still falling in, just slower than before. Chen Mang understood very well. A black hole's gravitational pull couldn't be reversed. Unless you exceeded the speed of light, nothing could escape. Even the God race, beings created by the laws of the universe, were still suppressed deep inside black holes to this day, unable to escape. If one could survive inside a black hole, then the black hole was an absolute prison. Once you went in, there was no coming back. Fortunately, Chen Mang managed to take a deep breath, his eyes glued to the rainbow-grade module on the screen, the Doppler SP7 thruster. He threw exactly 1,000 trillion units of iron ore straight into it, upgrading it in one go from level 500 to level 1,000. Without hesitation, he threw in nearly another 100 trillion, dragging the two acceleration modules, the nitrogen thruster and the super energy thruster, up to level 1,000. The planet ship's speed instantly spiked. He didn't even have time to look at the new super effects. As the planet in the planetary cabin burned intensely and energy surged into the thrusters, the planet ship finally managed to resist the gravitational pull. It didn't shoot away immediately, but at least it wasn't being dragged any deeper. It escaped that death zone, then followed an escape trajectory. Chen Mang only had one thought: escape first, figure it out later. The planet ship hurtled deep into space for 12 straight hours. Only when the surrounding environment stabilized did Chen Mang leave the ship. He shrank the ship down into a brooch, stepped into the refrigerator, and used the fridge to leave the area. Phew. Inside the cabin, he let out a long breath. By now, he had appeared in the Nyastar system. He could temporarily consider himself home. Initially, he didn't choose to leave the ship immediately and jump into the fridge to escape the gravity, because he understood very well. He had armor, but he didn't have speed. Even when the ship was running at full power, it was almost dragged in. If he had left the ship without any counteracting velocity, he would have been sucked straight into the center of the black hole instantly. He wouldn't have even had the time to step into the fridge. He made a mental note. Next time I run into something like this, absolutely do not rush it.